Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am glad that all of us are together. I apologize. I wasn't able to get to, don't mess up. Okay. Thursday and Friday, I ran into basically a moving issue that I had to resolve. But I'm here. I'm going to be here for the next 3 months, give or take. And so there should be a consistency among these shows at the very least for the next 3 months. And we will see after then. I am a leaf in the wind from my point of view. And there's more to that that I'll explain later, but currently I'm a leaf in the wind. I hope you guys are doing all right though. I am doing well. I am up. I am Adam. It seems that we have a lot of early risers here. New spot, yeah, just for the next 3 months, Ryan. 3 months, then move somewhere else. I have a guest coming in from Melbourne, Australia. That's a horrible accent. But because of the time difference, there's a 14-hour time difference between here and the East Coast. And so I tried to get him in as early as I possibly can, which for the show is 7 a.m. So Rich, what's his last name? Jeff Rich is going to be here. Jeff Rich runs his own website or his own YouTube channel called The Burning Archive. He also has a Substack page. He's a historian. And there was something interesting that someone in the Russian government said, at least I'm ascribing it to someone in the Russian government. I could not find the clip to save my life, so I apologize for not being able to find that clip. But what he said effectively boiled down to the dissolution of the Soviet Union was illegal. And because it was illegally done, then Ukraine is still considered internal politics. Okay, that is a can of worms, like nobody's business, right? Because there were several states that were associated with the Soviet Union, not just Ukraine. And if Ukraine is internal business, then what about the other ones, right? But Jeff, who's a student of history, is going to go into how that sowed the seeds for this current conflict. There's something else that's happening. Russia is opening up a can of hell on Ukraine over the last couple of days. Kiev and multiple other locations, but Kiev is getting the bulk of the media coverage. Now, Trump even came out and had comments about it. And in fact, I'll show you Trump's comments. Well, first, let me show you the text. So some of these are kind of funny. So Russia has pointed out, look, we were hitting military sites, which they typically do. And I want to show you the saddest thing in the world, or at the very least it was happening in that moment. This is Russia attacking what they're calling a Patriot. It is believed that they're either housing Patriot missiles and those type of things and other armaments, maybe even a drone factory. What you're seeing here, the missiles going up in the sky, that's the Patriot missile defense system doing everything in its power to stop the hell that is coming down to destroy that same Patriot missile. I want to show you this. I mean, keep in mind, these missiles are what, like $1,000 a pop. In a moment of desperation, it's like, fuck it, and just releases everything. So you see missiles going up into the sky trying to stop what it senses, what it sees on radar is coming. You hear the air alarms blaring. It's trying. It's doing everything it can. Look at that. It's like shooting them out back to back to back to back. And bam, something gets hit. Something gets hit. And there are no more missiles coming out of that Patriot battery. It is believed the Patriot battery was destroyed in this attack. Not to mention whatever the hell else was at that location. There are other parts of Kiev also that were hit. This is another video of drone strikes taking place on Kiev. Now, Russia has said that this was done in retaliation for strikes that took place on Russian soil. I mean, they sent like, well, 150, 160 drones at Russian cities, not to mention Russia is saying that they attacked Putin's helicopter while he was in the air. And so this is being done in retaliation. Now, of course, the West doesn't point that out. What they point is, oh my God, the deaths that are taking place. They also ignore the number of deaths that were taking place in regards to the wars that they are backing with Israel as they bomb schools and as they put people into camps. So obviously, this kind of jaded eye that's taking place from the standpoint of the West, obviously Kiev got hit relatively hard. But I want to go to my guest so we can talk to that. We can talk to Mark about that. Let me bring in my guest. We are joined by the man himself, and I am so glad that he hit me up, Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich is an author, historian, podcaster who's worked 33 years in government. You've been behind the curtain, my friend. You see how the machinery works. I'm now retired. He currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime of studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give context to our changing world. You can find Jeff on YouTube at The Burning Archive, and you can find him on the Substack at jeffrichsubstack.com. Jeff, thank you for joining me, man, especially this late at night. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, Jamal. It's a real pleasure. I really love watching your show, and it's wonderful to be a guest talking to you.
Oh, I am very happy. I've noticed your videos beforehand, so when you hit me up, I couldn't connect initially the person to the channel. And when I looked at the Burning Archive, I was like, oh, I know this place. I've been to this place. So that's even better. No, thank you for joining me, especially with your historical context. I love historical context because I think it's fascinating. Because, you know, what ends up happening is that as human beings, we are brought up into our own era. And if you don't know what happened in previous eras, the logic that went on in the previous era could still be working in the current era. And you could be replicating something that you don't realize you're replicating and just go through your era with that kind of blinders on about historical context. This is why I love talking to historians about this stuff. The thing I brought up to you, and I'm glad you found it receptive, that was a Russian, I don't know who he was, a diplomat, part of the government. And he made this argument that the Soviet Union's collapse was illegal, like meaning it didn't happen under legal terms. And because it didn't happen under legal terms, then Ukraine is technically an internal matter. And as I pointed out to the audience, that's a hell of a can of worms to open, because if that's true, there are a lot of other states that were part of the Soviet Union. Give me a take first on that before we step into it.
Well, I mean, I think it was a man called Anton, let me just double check his name, I have it right here, Kobyakov. And yeah, he's an official in the Russian government. And the argument is that when the Soviet Union dissolved in late 1991, it wasn't done by the book, so to speak. And there is a pretty plausible claim to say that is correct. And therefore, the Soviet Union continues to exist. And I guess by implication in the current moment, that the current Ukrainian state has another sort of black mark of illegitimacy on it, as well as all the other sort of things that we have all discussed with the ethno-nationalism and all that kind of stuff, elections, conscription, all those kinds of things. So it really goes back to the very disorderly way in which the Soviet Union was dissolved in 1991, which you could actually say is really, in some respects, one of the root causes of this conflict, in Ukraine, so it's perhaps not entirely surprising that this issue be raised again. It's been raised over many years by various people. It's not like a new argument. It's a pretty well-established argument. And even at the time, Mikhail Gorbachev said, this is not correct procedure. So it is a well-established sort of argument. But I guess raising it in the current moment, goes back to the whole question of, well, what are the legitimate borders of Ukraine? What's the right establishment of a state for Ukraine?
Yeah, but that's kind of treacherous to raise it now, right? I mean, and the reason why I say that is, it's one thing if you say, this war is being launched because NATO is on our border. You've overthrown the Ukrainian state. You have a heavy military presence on our border. You are killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians. Like, you can make an argument of provocation for that. When Russia says, look, we're not trying to invade anywhere else. We're dealing with this because this is a security matter on our border. Okay, again, that makes sense. The U.S. and the Cuban Missile Crisis is a really good example. And how would the U.S. react if Russia knocked over Canada, or Russia knocked over Mexico, and started putting in, goons, raising the military? We would act in similar ways. The moment that you say countries like Estonia, Latvia, because if you say Ukraine is internal, then all of those countries are internal, right? Or am I wrong? Am I missing something in this?
Look, I think that's right. I mean, there's the legal argument, I guess, and then there's the factual circumstances. Like no one's really going to reverse the Soviet Union. The dissolution of the Soviet Union. I think Vladimir Putin at one point said that anyone with a heart wouldn't regret the dissolution of the Soviet Union, but no one with a brain would want to put it back together again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the case. But there's a wonderful book about the dissolution of the Soviet Union by Vladislav Zubok, Collapse, and it's a great. I mean, he's worked in America and Britain for decades, but originally he grew up in the Soviet Union and was, if you like, a witness of those events. And in that book, he actually he's gone through the archives and all that sort of stuff. And there's a moment in late 1991 when Mikhail Gorbachev is on the phone to George Bush and says, if you recognise Ukraine as an independent state, you're sowing the seeds for a future conflict between Russia and Ukraine that will be worse than the breakup of Yugoslavia. And, here we are, whatever it is, I don't know.
And he could see that far.
34 years later.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He could see that far. And the book I read on the collapse had to do with Yeltsin and Gorbachev and this kind of changing political fates of the two. It didn't go into archival stuff. It was more so how this flip in power between these people over the course of a year, which was, again, fascinating in itself. But they could see that far into the future saying, look, this is going to be a problem. Is it because Gorbachev assumed that the whole 1 inch to the east stuff was bogus?
Well, he may well have had suspicions, but all the issues that are in play today were actively being discussed then. And even Yeltsin, who was really a key player in the dissolution of the Soviet, in the secession of Russia, which, just going back to the legal officials, argument about dissolution of the Soviet Union, it's actually the Russian Federation was, sorry, I've got a little mosquito in front of my face there. The Russian Federation, rather than Ukraine, was, if you like, the prime culprit in the dodgy dissolution of the Soviet Union.
Of course, Yeltsin.
Yeltsin pushing things, and we can go into the details of the process, but and it was his rivalry with Gorbachev which was also driving that to some extent. And that conflict between Yeltsin and Gorbachev was really fundamental to the cause of the problem. Even though people often think these days that the collapse of the Soviet Union was inevitable, it was really a very chaotic period in which lots of things could have happened. And, as suggested by that call from Gorbachev in late 1991 to the White House, could easily have been prevented. In fact, this historian really argues that if Gorbachev and Yeltsin had sort of come to terms a little bit more successfully, then the secession of Ukraine and Russia could have been avoided, and there would have been some kind of more union sort of state continuing. So, really fundamental thing. And in the end, America also plays a role in all of this as well. And some of all the arguments about eastward expansion, etc., were already there. There were people like James Baker who made the verbal promise not to move NATO 1 inch forward. The Secretary of State under George Bush Senior,
Mhm.
he was really advocating, I guess, support for Gorbachev, if you like, in terms of keeping the Soviet Union together and organising some kind of peaceful transition. But on the other hand, there were the hawks in the, the real anti-Russia, anti-Soviet types in the White House who were keen to sort of really, if you like, kick the Soviet Union when it was down and make sure that it could never ever get back up again. So, and one of those people was our old friend from the Iraq War, Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
So he has his fingerprints over this as well. So even at that moment of or in the year or so prior to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there was, I guess, division within the American government.
Yeah,
There
there
was
always is.
domestic lobbying from the Ukrainians in America, and there was also a kind of let's say, bad faith negotiation, at least from
Yeah.
some parts of the Americans.
I'm curious on something though. Let's assume for the moment that Russia accepted, okay, they aren't being serious with this 1 inch to the
Yeah.
east stuff. It sounds nice. But we don't believe that they're gonna honor it. Could they have done anything about it anyway? Like meaning if, like, for example, right now you have Donald
Yeah.
Trump pretending to be a mediator while being part of the conflict directly involved. And whether it's 100,000 or 200,000 Russians that have been killed, the US, even by our own papers, point out that we were directly involved in targeting weapon supply. The CIA was there for decades. And then you get Trump saying, hey, I'm not part of this. Let's mediate. And the deal that he's putting on the table is ludicrous. Like, Putin knows that Trump is BSing and full of it. If Gorbachev knew it at the time, could he have done anything about it? Or was he stuck with just the promise?
Yeah, it's difficult, and that's, I mean, it's part of the tragedy of the story of Gorbachev that he was a visionary in many ways. He introduced these major reforms, but in a way, he also unleashed more than he could handle,
Yeah.
and he sort of. There was and for Yeltsin too, there were people sort of wanted to be like America. So America was perhaps at its maximum point of soft power. So even though they were also a bit suspicious of their intentions, and Gorbachev pleaded with the US to support, have like a Marshall Plan, if you like, a sort of economic reconstruction package
He wouldn't do it.
the Soviet Union to organise a transition. And there was meetings of the G7 or whatever number of great powers they were at that point, and effectively partly for the kind of reasons I talked about before, with Dick Cheney wanting to kick the Soviet Union so far down into the hole that it will never ever get back up again. They kind of refused to offer that package, and
Right.
Gorbachev felt betrayed, and I think the figure was something like $100 billion, and I don't know, how that would sort of index in current dollar terms, but let's say it's $500 billion. Okay, can you imagine what the comparative opportunity cost of spending $500 billion to have peace with the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
peace in Europe? And a lot of avoided wars over the last few decades. Imagine what that. I mean, how much has the US spent already just in this conflict in Ukraine? It's truly astonishing. So, I think there was definitely a sense in which it was a missed opportunity, both in terms of poor leadership or perhaps not quite naive, but overly trusting, overly dependent, perhaps leadership, foreign policy leadership by Gorbachev in the late 80s, early 90s, but also a failure of vision from the United States. I mean, if perhaps they had gone more with James Baker and George Bush's seniors' better instincts, we could have gone an entirely different path. And it was enormously consequential because, of course, Russia and all the post-Soviet states, including Ukraine, really had, a wretched next 10 to 20 years, horrible, horrible economic and social collapse. In a way, China was also a beneficiary of all that because, all that American investment that could have gone into the Soviet Union, if you like, went into China. And the world developed in a very different and distorted way.
But Jeff, that assumes the peace is the objective. And I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Just
well, no, that's right. That's right. That's right. And I think that's also part of the issue at the moment. I mean, I think that's why people have got very confused with Trump and, Trump the peacemaker and all that sort of stuff. I don't think really he's ever, I don't think he doesn't have a vision of peace that he's working towards. What he has is a set of objectives about ending the war and getting, what he wants out of the end of the war. So, I mean, in a way, all he's done is just redefine US war aims to, come back with some rare earths from Ukraine and, minimise his future exposure and sort of redirect some of his military resources towards China. He doesn't have a vision of saying, well, Russia and the European Union and Ukraine are all neighbours and all economically connected, culturally connected in many complex ways. How are they going to live in peace together? And how are we going to facilitate that happening? He's really just approached, I think, the peace process in a very mercenary and ineffective way.
Yeah, I think he's approaching like an American president. I mean, I think he's approaching it like an American president. And I know that sounds horrible, but like Trump has said two things that I don't think he's fully internally connected to yet. One, it's proxy war. Okay, that means our hands are all over it. And two, in a couple of years, Ukraine is going to be part of Russia, meaning Russia is going to effectively take Ukraine. Okay, so that means you lost the war. It's your war. You've owned it as your war, and you've lost that war. And yet he's dictating terms as if that's not true. And, Mark has always brought up this question of, can an American president accept what Russia would demand in order to make peace? And the answer seems to be no. I mean, Vance is saying, well, Russia's demands are too much. Okay, they're demanding that you stop giving them intelligence and weapons if you want a ceasefire. Like the notion that you call for a ceasefire and then you build up Ukraine full of weapons, military, more intelligence. You allow them to raise another military. You put in European troops. This stuff is nonsense. Like it's a non-starter on its face. And either he's not bright enough to know that, either he's being led by people who don't want peace, which I suspect is true. But he doesn't seem to connect with the fact that you've lost. That seems to be the overwhelming thing to me. And it seems that this would have to keep going until it is so brimmingly clear that they lost, that no deal can be made until then. Give me a take on that. Like, how do you even make a lasting peace in Europe after this, considering these people don't seem to want peace, or the people in power don't anyway?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I think in some ways, I think it's good to think about all the different parties involved. So there's Russia. There's Ukraine, obviously. There's the United States, but Europe also, the European Union, just to sort of gather together France, Germany, and all those people. But also, I think Britain is also a separate player as well. And I think, at some point there's going to have to be a a recognition by the United States and the European Union that they have failed to achieve their objectives. And I think that will probably be provoked by a military crisis and a governance crisis in Ukraine, ultimately. I think that is what will... And in some senses, I almost felt that part of Trump's rush to sort of end the war quickly was, decided to get out before it got too bad, sort of thing. Get me away from this crime scene.
Right.
Someone remove the fingerprints straight away.
Get away from this
And
crime
by the way,
scene. I
just
love
give that bag of money to me.
Yeah. I think you're right, but please.
I just saw a little bit of the footage you were talking about of the recent bombing of the Patriots, the pace of advance of the Russian forces
Sumy,
is gathering, and the strains in Ukrainian society, the Ukrainian state, are very acute. I mean, the conscription, the nationalism, all that sort of thing. I feel there will come a moment when reality will be forced upon the United States and Europe as well, and they'll just be forced by a situation to deal with it in a different way. Now,
what is that?
There is a tendency from the US just to say, it doesn't matter how badly we lose a war, we are never defeated.
Right.
And I think I just think in the new distribution of power around the world, that kind of position is simply no longer viable, because everyone can see, yes, you have been defeated in Ukraine, and yes, you have lost a tariff war with China. That the sustainability of the kind of American primacy, American supremacy sort of positioning around the world is it's collapsing. I think it's really collapsing, and in a way, the authority of the United States is not in the control of the United States; it's in the control of all the other countries around the world. So things are sort of shifting beneath the surface, and I think it will come to a crisis point driven by military situation that will force the hand for some kind of renegotiation. Now, it's going to be difficult given the grandiose positioning of Trump, and also the very strong positioning of the European Union. But I think they'll be forced with. My big concern is there'll be, a kind of a social catastrophe at some point in Ukraine. There's already been millions of refugees from Ukraine.
Right.
If the Ukrainian state collapses under military pressure, what's going to happen then? The authority, will people be wanting to flee into Europe? Will people want to get out of Ukraine as fast as they can? How well disposed will the countries of Europe be about that? We know the United States won't be taking anybody, and there'll be a lot of water under the bridge, if we can put it in a sort of euphemistic term, that society will have to come to terms with. It's been bitterly divided by some pretty toxic ideas over the last few years.
Oh, that's an understatement.
So that's the big thing I guess I worry about, because often the ends of war, and if you like, if you think about the collapse of the Soviet Union, it wasn't a war, it was the end of the Cold War, but it wasn't as catastrophic as having your city bombed. But that was a complete social catastrophe for Russia in the post. So, I mean, life expectancy fell, there was like the poverty rate more than doubled. It was, you know, people celebrate the birth of freedom in the
Yes, they
Soviet
do.
Union in the
Yeah.
West, but they just ignore the pain and the suffering that sort of caused. And I guess I fear that we could be in a similar situation
In
in
Ukraine.
Ukraine and also in Europe, Poland. Refugees will cross the border, they'll go into Hungary, they'll, all that sort of thing. And, those societies are already a bit resistant to those refugee flows. So you could get some very nasty situations indeed. And that's why I really think it's important for, even though the European Union's been pretty stroppy, as people say in Australia, pretty obstreperous about negotiating with
What's
Russia.
that? I'm stripperous. I
In
gotta
the
look at that
end,
word.
if there's a humanitarian catastrophe on the borders of, Russia and Europe, that's Russia and Europe's social problem to solve. It's got nothing to do with the the United States, wrecked the place, but the United States is not going to help fix that problem at all. I would imagine, certainly not under the current
Just to be clear, though, you
administration's
believe
policies.
that it may take a military catastrophe in order to create the social pressure necessary for, because one of the other issues that Russia has, what time is it?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a few minutes. One of the other issues that Russia has, and I think the world has in general, dealing with Ukraine, and I know that Donald Trump has, if indeed he has any instinct for trying to bring it to so close, is the government that's in Kiev. They've gotten rid of opposition parties. They've gotten rid of opposition media. They've murdered opposition candidates. They put opposition candidates in jail. I have a good friend of the show that comes on who is living in Switzerland, I believe, because he'd be murdered if he was in Ukraine. Aristovich, he's living abroad because, again, he would get murdered. There was a recent murder on, I forget where it was, in Spain or somewhere, of a Ukrainian diplomat or dissident who was outside of the country for fear of his life. And of course, Ukrainian media celebrated the murder and assassination of that opposition figure. So it's like, how do you get political change in a government that is just
Yeah.
a dictatorship by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination at this point?
Yeah. Well, I just can't see how you can unless,
Yeah.
I guess there's two ways. One, the military collapse type situation. And I mean, I'm no military analyst, so I can't really tell, but it does seem, getting close. And then the other, I guess, would be some sort of internal coup, some sort of action by the military to replace the leader will probably come, I guess, from the military, because the parties have been abolished. People are terrified. The intelligence agencies are highly, so you can't expect demonstrations on the street to sort of change the situation. So it would likely be an act of desperation of survival of the state by military in some way.
Wow.
And, the ideology of some of the people running the regime in Ukraine are I guess the worry would be they want to go down in a blaze of nationalist glory.
Wow. Jeff, man, I have enjoyed this. I have to bring you back because I want to get into some of the other items. Like Gorbachev is a really good example. I am fascinated by him because Carl, will into you in one moment. I am of the Russians that I've met hate him. The Americans that I've met love him. I'm one of those Americans that love him because I think we need visionaries and we need people who are willing to extend a hand, even when the hands get bitten, to be able to still do it. Because otherwise, we just have a world of sociopaths. Jeff, man, got to bring you back. Jeff, thank you for this, man. I hope this wasn't, I know this is late for you. I'm sorry that this is so late in the evening.
It's totally fine. Jamal, it's really wonderful to talk to you. And yeah, it'd be lovely to talk to you about Gorbachev again sometime.
Excellent. And just other items associated with the war in general, historical context. I'd love to have you back.
Absolutely.
Jeff Rich,
Absolutely.
he's an author, historian, podcaster, has worked 33 years in government. He is now retired. He currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history, and his knowledge of historical currents. Oh, and how knowledge of historical occurrences can give a context to a changing world and political environment. You can find Jeff on YouTube at The Burning Archive. You can also find him on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. Jeff, thank you, man. I really appreciate this. We had a great audience here also for you. So this is great.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Have a good one. Be safe. All right, we're moving from one great guest to another fan favorite, the man himself, Carl Jha. Carl Jha, there we are. Carl Jha, he's a host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their historical, cultural, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. What do you call himself? A shit poster? I don't think so. I think you sometimes, but usually I think you post great stuff. You can also follow him on its YouTube channel at Carl Jha and on Patreon at Silk and Steel. Yeah, Silk and Steel. Patreon.Silk and Steel. Carl, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Thanks, Jamarlt. How are you?
I'm doing good. Better that you're with me. There are several issues that I want to bring up that I'm fascinated by. One, so Brian Berletic was on the show, and he was talking about how there are government plans made by these workshops for all sorts of things. They even have one for like a zombie invasion, right? But in regards to China, one of the things and the ideas they came up with is stop the ability of China to move parcels around the world. Meaning if you could stop there, you may not be able to stop their industrial base, but if you could at the very least stop them from being able to transport products, you can damage the country in an economic sense. So that seems to be move and counter move. China's like, okay, you got your plan, we'll do Belt and Road. Now, one of the items, and I'm not sure if this is even part of Belt and Road, China and Iran have just set up a rail network where they made their first transit of products from China to Iran, going from, I think it was like 40 or 50 miles to 15 miles, basically meaning shortening the distance between them and doing this overland where they can avoid some countries that are effectively Western countries, basically getting around Western influence on their ability to trade with each other. Give me your take on that. I mean, am I right that this is, I mean, granted, there's practical sense of cutting it to 15 miles, but there seems to be also a geostrategic reason for it. Give me a take on this.
Well, this is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, the whole idea of the Belt and Road Initiative, there's an economic Silk Road economic belt and the Maritime Silk Road. So the belt actually refers to the land route, which connects China to all the way to Europe. And there are many ways to go to Rome, right? And so one way is going from China to Russia to EU, but now because of the war, a lot of the Russia route, a lot of the European logistic companies, they refuse to use the Russian route. So China's like, oh, well, we have alternatives because we also built a southern route going through Iran. It goes through Iran, Turkey, and going up the Balkans all the way to Poland. But another thing is this is a idea. One idea of China building this multiple connecting node is that United States has always have a boner for blockading China at the Strait of Malacca, right? Because that's where most of the China's energy supply come from. And U.S. Navy make no secret about they want to blockade Strait of Malacca. China's like, you know what? We're just going to build as many connection points as possible. U.S. Navy cannot possibly be at all points at all time. And U.S. Navy certainly cannot airdrop their aircraft carrier in the middle of the desert in Central Asia, right? So this is the land route is pretty secure, and the rail also has advantage that it's faster than the sea transport, and
Right.
it's cheaper than flight. But anyway, most of the European and American airline can't fly through Russian airspace anyway nowadays. So so there's the rail presents a alternative third option, and so China is one of the largest purchaser of Iranian energy, oil and gas.
Right.
This is another thing that United States really hates. But Trump said we're gonna levy sanction against anybody who purchase Iranian oil. Well,
That's
the
where I was
largest
going.
purchaser
Yep.
of Iranian oil is China. Well,
Yep.
I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna increase the tariff back to like 145% on China? We're gonna go back to what happened last month. I mean, this is silly. So like Trump really doesn't have too much card in this. So China will continue to buy Iranian energy no matter what, and there's nothing U.S. can do about it. And some of that oil can be transported now through the rail link. So they're kind of outside the reach of U.S. Navy. And I know like. I don't think even Israel wants to mess with that. Israel has threatened to strike Iran's nuclear site, but I don't think Israel at this point want to particularly antagonize China by bombing this rail link, right? Because China happened. Somebody has posted like how China is the largest trading partner of Israel, blah blah blah. But look, China selling air fryer to Israel. They can't use the air fryer to kill Palestinians, right? Whereas Israel's number 2 trading partner, United States, is actually giving bombs and planes, right?
Exactly.
So if you want to do something about trade with Israel, work on U.S., work on your imperial core countries, and we also know from experience of Russia sanction and Cuba sanction to know that trade sanction doesn't really work. The Western sanction on Russia totally backfire. Even if China cuts off Israel, what's stopping United States from buying those Chinese products and then give it to Israel? Nothing. Right? There's only if China cuts off trade with all the country in the world, like what Trump was trying to do, right? Levying tariff on everybody. That's just crazy talk. So anyway, so I just have to put that out there. The idea for China wants to build as much connectivity to everybody as possible. That includes to Iran, and China right now is by one of the main backer of Iran by the very fact that China is the largest purchaser of Iranian oil and gas, despite the U.S. objection.
I'm glad you bring up Iran, because I was going to get to that one also. So, for one, I don't believe Iran is a rogue actor. I'm sorry, that Israel is a rogue actor. I don't think they do anything without U.S. permission, especially from the standpoint of attacks. And even this was taking place, and I'm just using this as for context. I know you're not necessarily big on the stuff with Israel, but this is Kristi Noem, DHS secretary, I believe the Wailing Wall in Israel. Just outrageous. Like, what the hell are you doing, right? And she's doing this as Israel bombs a school. Yes, that's a child in that school trying to get out of fires. So when you point out,
Kristi, no, she's a secretary of the Homeland Security.
Yes.
What the hell is a secretary of Homeland Security doing in Israel? What does her official position have to do with Israel? And what I want to know is, did she go there on her capacity as a private citizen, meaning herself pay the plane ticket to travel to Israel, or did the U.S. taxpayer pay for her trip? Or even worse, did Israel pay for her trip to go to Israel? I mean, there's obviously some serious questions. Why would Israel? Well, we know Israel buys a lot of our politicians anyway, but that question should still be asked. Why is Israel paying our politicians, and why is our politician doing Israel's bidding?
It would never be asked.
Supposedly America first person like Kristi Noem, like what the hell is she doing? What the hell are you doing?
Carl, that question will never be asked in our media, right? And I'm pointing out both are taking place simultaneously. All right. So the U.S. has come up with this plan to effectively relocate, ethnically cleanse Gaza, working with Netanyahu to do so while pretending as if, oh, we didn't give Israel permission to do this. We don't like what they're doing. And you get other European capitals that have followed suit 2 minutes, after like over a year of them effectively pursuing this genocide. All right. One of the things, and one of the reasons, I know it's a lot with the chat. The reason I'm bringing that up is because there is this shum that has been put in the U.S. media that there is a distance between the U.S. and Israel, and that Donald Trump doesn't like Netanyahu, and that there's a split. And as I keep telling people, that split and that distance is only to give space for Israel to do what it's doing without the U.S. getting heat from it, despite the fact that everybody knows that the U.S. effectively backs Israel to the hilt. Iran it's the same thing, right? That now there's media saying Israel is preparing to attack Iran. Okay. Now, knowing full well that China is Iran's biggest trading partner, Russia is arming on with Iran on this. What is China's take on this? I mean, obviously they're not going to like it, but is it just, hey, we don't like you doing this, and that's the end of it? Like, they are going after, as you point out, one of their biggest trading partners in relation to energy, a country that needs energy, especially if it's manufacturing everything else, and it needs it at a decent price. It's able to get it from Iran against U.S. objections, and now even against attacks at this point by Israel. What is China's take on this?
What would that mean? That means when Iran finally detonate that nuclear weapon test, China will just say, "Oh, we're concerned." I mean, that's what it means. Like, China is not going to go out and blame Iran for conducting a nuclear test. China will at most say, "Oh, we're a little bit concerned about this."
That's unfortunate that they've decided
because
to do
right
that.
now this is what they're forcing Iran to do. Like now, like the whole Israel is going to attack Iran. This is just part of Trump's negotiation tactic, right? Trump wrote about this in The Art of Deal, and we're going to make crazy demands, make it so crazy that they will end up accepting what our original demand was. So Iran is not going to back down on this, and certainly not in the face of threat from Israel. And what is going to end up happening is pushing Iran even closer to be a fully declared nuclear power. I saw a post on X. Somebody pointed out before Trump first term, before Trump tore up the nuclear agreement, and at that point, Iran has about 3.3% of refined uranium. Yeah. They're only like they only had enrichment 3%. Now they're more like 60%. They're getting closer to getting that bomb, and everything pointing out that they really should get the bomb, because look at North Korea. United States is not bothering North Korea right now because North Korea has a bomb. Nobody is threatening to bomb Pyongyang at this point, right? Yeah. Whereas if Iran has a bomb, Israel would have to think twice about carrying out a strike against the Iran nuclear facility. So I think at this point, where Iran will probably get the bomb. We're just looking at what the timeline is. When we're talking about when, not if now. And there's not much U.S. can do about it. U.S. can bluff, but at end of the day, I don't think they're going to be serious about going to war against Iran, because we saw what happened when United States went to war against Yemen. A country without air force and air defense, and U.S. Navy lost 3 F-18 jets, right? Yep. And how are they going to expect to take on Iran? I mean, that's just foolhardy. So I don't believe that's in the cards.
So you think it's a bluff?
I think Trump is playing hardball, and I think he's gonna it's gonna blow up in his face, because just like how Trump trying to play hardball on the tariff war against China. Guess what happened? He just backtracked on his threat to levy 50% tariff on EU again. Like first he said, "Oh, we're gonna slap 50% of tariff on EU," and then a couple of days later he's like, "Well, okay, we'll put an extension. We'll give them 90 days extension." So basically, we're back to square one. who can deal with this guy? Like, how can anybody take this guy's word seriously? He literally just changes his policy every 2 or 3 days. He got tweet, and how can you make a deal with such a guy? He's a guy that originally tore the nuclear agreement with Iran. How is Iran is gonna trust United States now that even if Trump agreed to this deal and stick with it, which is a big if, how would Iran know the next U.S. president won't just tore up the deal like what Trump did? So
but that's just it. Trump's not offering the deal. Like what Trump is offering is a red line for Iran. Like Iran they said in the very beginning, this is a red line. And Trump immediately went to the red line and is like, we need you to go beyond your red line, in which case they said, F off. And he's like, all right, but we're going to attack you. See, this is the difference between the sanction war, though. The sanction war, he's dealing with China, a country he respects, regardless of what he says. He still respects Xi Jinping. It's a power center. Even in Russia, he respects Putin. It's a power center. He may complain, oh my God, I can't believe Putin killed these people. Yeah, but all things being equal, 101, mano a mano, you know that you can't test him in this way. Iran is different in the way that I think Trump perceives them.
Well, that's because...
One last thing. The people
You're
who are
right.
around you,
You're right. That's because Iran doesn't have bomb. That's Iran doesn't have the bomb yet. If Iran have the bomb, Trump will have to respect them. I mean, so this is why all logic points to Iran should get the bomb, sooner rather than later. And once they have that, they can you don't have to deal with the U.S. pestering, just like Kim Jong-un is not dealing with the U.S. pestering right now. So yeah, there's that. And if you look at the U.S. policy right now, they say they respect Russia. They say they respect China, but United States still providing weapons to Ukraine. They're still shipping missiles to Ukraine. And this is from Donald Trump, the guy who said he will stop the war in 24 hours, after he becomes the president. He said he will stop in 24 hours. and now he was in front of the camera said, oh, I'm very upset with Putin because they're launching missile at Kiev. It's like, what do you expect? You can stop the war this minute, just one phone call to Zelensky, say we are stopping all weapons and ammunitions, because they're spending a lot of weapons and ammunition at the front. There's no way Ukraine can carry on this fight without the weapons and ammunition NATO and US provide them. Stop the ammunition. He can't literally stop the war in 24 hours. He chose not to. And same thing with China. He said, okay, yeah, I respect China. We still want to trade. And then right after they reached the agreement to pause, do a 90 days pause on the retaliatory tariff, guess what Trump did? Trump slapped new AI restriction on China. They banned NVIDIA. So NVIDIA was banned from selling their top of the line AI chips to China. So NVIDIA didn't like that because China is their main customer. So they come up with the idea to sell this newer version of chip, just especially made to China, called H20. And now Trump says, no, you can't even sell that to China. You can't even sell this like watered down version of AI chips to China. And this is why Jensen Huang went to China immediately after that, because Jensen Huang thought, holy shit, we're gonna lose our largest market. And now Huawei is coming out with their own AI chips, which is just as good. And you know what? The other Chinese companies don't have any choice because they can't get NVIDIA chips, so they're gonna have to use Huawei chips. What Trump did? Trump said, okay, we are going to sanction anybody who uses Huawei chips. And he said anyone who uses a Huawei chip will violate U.S. export control. Now, okay, when he say anyone, he means anyone. That means if a Chinese company
anywhere around the world
doing business in China Chinese company doing business China, if they use a Huawei chip, they
Yes.
will be violating U.S. export control
Yes.
laws,
Isn't that
and then
amazing?
they will be placed on U.S. sanctions. But a lot of the Chinese companies forget it. We're under all kind of sanction right now anyway. And we can't get the Nvidia chip. What do you expect us to do? We're gonna go with Huawei. And just after the Trump announcement came out, Malaysia announced they're gonna host a data center hosting Huawei AI chips, using DeepSeek. so Malaysia is fully going with the Chinese tech stack right now, and we're going to see if U.S. follows through Trump wars slapping sanction against Malaysia. But we're going to have to see. But people are making their clear choice now. Kishore Murbani, the former Singaporean diplomat, had repeatedly told Washington, people in Southeast Asia, we don't want to be forced to choose between China and United States. We don't want to choose. We want to do business with everyone. But the subtext he was trying to convey to Washington is if you force us to choose, you may not like our choice, because we're going to go with China, and you're not going to like that. And that's what's happening right now. U.S. push, and now these Southeast Asia countries, you know what? Forget it. Our economic destiny lies with China, not with the United States.
They don't seem to get the lessons from history, do they? I mean, look at what they did to Russia. They put 25,000 sanctions on Russia, and what did Russia do? They just became self-sufficient. And China is big enough where it could become self-sufficient every bit as much as Russia did in regards to saying, okay, well, fine, we'll make this beer here, we'll make this alcohol here, we'll make this airplane here, we'll do this stuff here. In which case, they just built out their own industries, which is the reason why their economy is at number 4, and Europe is effectively tanked. Why do they think this is going to be somehow different with China and AI or microchips or any of these other things?
And you know what? Pentagon, now they're saying, oh, we're going to flood the Taiwan Strait with drones. We're going to make a nightmare for the Chinese. Okay, let's look at where drones are being deployed in large number in modern battlefields. This is in Ukraine. Guess what's happening? Both sides of the Ukraine war, their drones are basically, they're all sourced their parts from China. They're all sourced their parts from China to make their drones. So if United States want to carry out drones warfare against China, they have to go to Chinese supplier to get the parts. And this is what happened when with one of the U.S. drone maker that was trying to shut out DJI, because DJI is their largest competition. And China says, you know what? I see what you're doing. You're not going to get our batteries. And now they're complaining to the U.S. Congress that China is unfairly targeting them because China is not giving them the parts they need to make their drones. So come on. All your product is just a wrapper around Chinese component and Chinese technology, right? Because the United States no longer makes anything anymore. And then you want to undercut China. I mean, it's not going to work. That's not how it works.
It doesn't even make logical sense when you think about it. The notion of we're competing with this Chinese company. We are going to try to somehow edge out this Chinese company while requiring parts from China. And to double down on that, so this came out from Axios, which is, I suspect is very true. Tech race with China is top intel priority, Deputy CIA Director says. The problem with this is always in the details, right? One of the things that the Trump administration has decided to do was cut resources into science. So they cut physics, the money that we were given to colleges and people in order to study these topics to 40, 45%, if not 50%. So it's okay, so you're trying to have a tech race while simultaneously gutting the very knowledge base that you would have to have that tech race. It makes no sense.
They're kicking out all the foreign students, and they're kicking out all the foreign students. And this, a lot of people don't know this, but 50% of the AI talent actually come from China. But in the past, because more attractive career choices in the United States,
they come here.
A lot of that 50% of the Chinese AI talent, they come to United States to work in the startups in Silicon Valley. But now Trump is saying, screw those foreign students. Those foreign students, we need to create opportunity for our own. Well, okay, I mean that's great, but the fact is, for the past decades, I would say a couple of decades, United States research institutions have relied on foreign talents, because I know this because my dad came to United States to study in 1985 as PhD. And when I visited him in 1990 in University of Chicago, I went to his research lab. I look around, it's all Chinese grad students working there. I mean, for the past 20, 30 years, U.S. research institutions have relied on Chinese, Indian, Iranian, Russian, all the various foreign top, human capital. And this is one of the things that people used to say when they're trying to say, oh, we still have this one, United States has this one big leg up against China. That's because our ability to attract top talent from all over the world. Well, guess what? Trump just shut the door on that. Trump just shut the door. And this is why Trump is my president. He's my president for accelerationism. This is like when Chinese people on the internet called Trump the nation builder and the nation being China, they're not kidding. They genuinely believe Trump is actually a Chinese spy, working for the goods of the motherland. But in practicality, that's how it's working out.
That's so sad.
Trump
because you're absolutely right. He's kicked out brains, like you call human capital, smart people who would be doing the research. He's gut the amount of information, like money going to research. The tariffs are going to cause inflation and prices. This is at the exact same time where the dollar is losing value. Treasury bonds, that's another one I want to get into with you. China has become, or what is it? The UK, I believe, has become like the number 2 buyer of UK bond, of US Treasury bonds or something like that. Like China has been, I may be getting the number wrong, but effectively China has been getting rid of treasuries slowly and silently.
The one to watch out. People keep on saying, "Oh, China can drop the nuke on the bond market by selling," but China is actually not being the one that's nuking the bond market. The one that's doing it is Japan, because Japan now is the number 1 holder of the U.S. Treasuries, and Japan has publicly said, if Trump is going to continue with his tariff nonsense, they're going to sell their whole U.S. Treasury bond. They didn't mince any words. They said they're going to sell if Trump keeps on going with his tariff war business. So, and Japan has hold more than $1 trillion worth of the Treasury bond. So that's going to nuke the bond market even more. And right now, Trump is making enemy out of everyone. This is Japan. Japan used to be like the yes man of the Western alliance, right? Japan used to not able to say no to the United States, but now Japan is threatening to nuke the bond market if Trump persists on pursuing this tariff war against Japan. Because for Japan, the Trump tariff on foreign auto is an existential issue for them, because Japan, the large part of the Japanese economy actually do depend on export of their auto industry. And their auto industry is going to hit really hard by this 25% tariff on all foreign autos and foreign auto parts in the United States. So for them, that's not the issue. They're not going to back down. And this is why they're issuing this ultimatum of selling U.S. treasuries. And this is why, the interest rate has been going up and up in the United States. And that means United States now will have to, U.S. government, when they inevitably have to borrow more money to pay down the old debt, they're going to have to pay more and more in interest. This is how, and the so-called Doge, forget about it. The Doge, they're just scratching the surface. Yeah. They're just scratching the surface, like because all the money that Doge supposedly have saved, that doesn't even match the new increase in our defense budget, because our defense budget is now officially over $1 trillion.
Carl, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. The richest man on the planet decided to try to cut funding by firing some of the poorest people in the country and going after Social Security, Medicaid, claiming that this waste, fraud, and abuse, which is why they were firing all of these people who were basically making minimum wage, or not minimum wage, but making it basically a livable wage. Meaning it wasn't like, this view of a man who has like $500 billion going after people who make $40,000 a year is horrendous, right?
But we need a $1 trillion Pentagon budget, and we're not even at war. Well, not officially. We're not even at war with China yet.
By the way, it gets even worse because what they're trying to do and pass the budget, this big, beautiful budget that they're talking about, is going to put $15 trillion on the U.S. debt. And Donald Trump has been lying to people. Say, oh, no, it's not going to do that. And you get Republicans freaking out saying, oh, my God, he's putting $5 trillion on the debt now, $15 trillion over the next X number of years. And so Doge say, what, $150 billion? It makes no sense.
Yeah. It's chump change. It's chump change. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just outrageous that's the way you're going to save money, by destroying social services.
Well, I mean, that's the way they always do it, Jamar. They say they hate socialism, but they love socialism for the rich.
Yes, they do.
It's always socialism for the rich, capitalism for everybody else.
Yes, they do. They're giving themselves trillions in tax cuts, trillions. Yeah. And even Trump's no tax on tips, it took a Democrat to add that to it. Trump and the Republicans didn't add it. And this may be a fool's choice or conversation, right? Because this is going to die in the Senate, or at the very least, up to this point, it's dying in the Senate. Yeah. So we'll see. But China has moved into the number 3 spot. Britain has moved into the number 2 spot regarding treasuries. So they are dropping some of this.
Well, because China is not buying new treasuries. So when they're just holding their old treasury holdings until maturity, and then they're not putting more money to buy new bonds that's been put on the market. Because now all the dollar surplus China get from their trade surplus, they just invest in Belt and Road Project. This is why United States really, really hate Belt and Road Project, because they want China to plow their money into the U.S. bond market.
And
This is why before, Janet Yellen keep on going to China, because that's what she wants them to buy bond. This is the thing. Trump said he's worried about the trade deficit, but he's not allowing the U.S. company to sell China the American product that Chinese actually want to buy, like AI chips, like the high-tech products. The China is willing to pay big bucks for them. China used to pay like $450 billion in chip imports. That China used to. That's more than what China spent on importing oil. But United States, no, we're not selling that. The best we can do is soybeans and corn, right? And China's like, okay, you know what? There's only soybeans and corn. So many soybeans and corn we can consume. Okay.
I have big, beautiful cows, pigs, but no chips, no manufacturing, no technology. So but it's. In a geopolitical sense, do you see this as both countries trying to insulate themselves from one another? I mean, Trump being overtly about it in the way he's done the trade wars.
That's what's shaping up. This is kind of the world that United States have been pushing for. Yeah, that's the first Trump term since 2018. China that didn't want that, because China was perfectly happy with the post-war system, and that's why China is actually now the status quo power. People try to pose China as like this rising challenger. No, China is the status quo power right now. It's the United States is a disruptor of the international order. They talk about rule-based. That's why they talk about rule-based international order. They don't talk about international order anymore, because obviously when they talk about rule-based international order, they're not talking about United Nations. They're not even talking about ICC. They're talking about the rules made from Washington. But so right now, the way that U.S. is pushing for, we're going to look at like a Cold War 2.0, right? But this is because people in Washington think, we know how that Cold War 1.0 played out. We won that war. we'll make you into a Soviet bloc, and then we have this Western bloc. We will win. But except what United States right now is trying to do is trying to build a wall between United States and its allies, and China is doing business with the rest of the world. So if there's going to come down to two blocks, U.S. bloc is going to end up in the position of the Soviet bloc in the Cold War 1.0. It will be a much smaller bloc, both in terms of economic size and influence. China will encompass everything else. They will do business with everybody.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that
this
you're
is
busy.
what they don't realize.
Yeah, I don't even get the sense
they
that
don't
you're
realize the balance. They don't realize that the balance of power have shifted. The Pentagon, they're still practicing like to fight Pacific War. They think they're going to fight Pacific War 2.0 against China, but they don't realize if in a Pacific 2.0, China is in the position of United States in 1941. The United States in the position of Empire of Japan in 1941 in terms of industrial capacity, because China has so much more. China is a manufacturing superpower now, not United States.
Right. Carl, illuminating conversation. And I agree with you, by the way. I do, like a country of 1.4 billion people that is a manufacturing hub for the world. And those factories, in the same way that we did, hey, we don't need you to produce cars, we need you to produce tanks. Okay, same thing is true for China. Hey, we need you to produce, armaments, bullets, guns, etc. China is a massive manufacturing hub. And to give a comparison, like the U.S. back in the 40s was able to effectively fill the Russian military or the Soviet military and put two militaries on both sides of the globe because that was our manufacturing base. We have a service economy now, and that we don't have that capability. China does.
Today, China has 200 times the shipbuilding capability than United States. And U.S. Navy is going to South Korea and Japan for help for the naval buildup against China.
Just amazing. Wow. Carl, thank you for this. It's illuminating, to put it mildly. Like our system is maddening, and it makes no sense. And I get the sense a lot of this is being done out of desperation, not out of planning and thinking through it. And how do we deal with this? I get the sense that these guys are moving out of desperation. Oh my God, this horse is almost out the barn. How do we maintain primacy? And I don't think they have any idea how, frankly. Carl Jha, man, always appreciate you joining me, man. I love these conversations. Carl Jha, he's the host of Silk and Steel podcasts. He also is on YouTube under Carl Jha. Definitely check him out on that too. Focused on China surrounding regions, their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast at Steel Silk In, and subscribe to support their podcast at patreon.com, Silk and Steel. And definitely check out his podcast, because as you point out, you go through historical events like week by week over Chinese history going back, 4,000 years?
I'm at 400 BC right now.
Wow. That is mind-blowing, right? I remember watching this thing, and I'm going to let you go, but I remember watching this thing on Britain for 1,000 years of history, and they're starting off like at the very beginning and moving on, and after a while, you're like, okay, wow, this is impressive. And then you multiply that by 4 times. It's hard to wrap your head around. It's just astonishing. Thank you, my man. You be safe, okay, Carl? Thank you for this.
Anytime.
All right. Carl is fantastic. I love talking to Carl. He knows his stuff. He is entertaining. He's enthusiastic when he's talking about these subjects. I would tell you, the historical thing is always fascinating. There's a channel called The Great War. And in The Great War, they go through, so they have 3. The Great War, World War II, and there's another intermediary period where they go week by week by week on every event that took place from the start all the way to the end, and then after period. Oh, it is fantastic. It's fantastic. And so what Carl is doing is something very similar to that, where he's doing this kind of historical context of China going all the way up to just Chinese history. It is amazing. Just outright amazing. We have chats. Let me go to chat. I said I was going to do this, and damn it, I'm going to do it. Jabari, VLC Media. What a treat. We have Jamal on Memorial Day. I did not know it was Memorial Day till my mama told me about it yesterday. So yes, happy Memorial Day, all those veterans, all the people who gave their lives to this country. Thank you for your service. I would say one thing. It is unfortunate that you have a government that doesn't regard that service with a certain sacred obligation to it. Meaning, I'm not going to throw you into wars that are political wars. I'm not going to do stuff for just geopolitical expansion, leveraging your life to do so. I think that is a violation of a duty from the political space in regards to this kind of obligation the political space has to its military people. I think they failed in that obligation, whether it was the Iraq War, whether it was the Vietnam War, or whether it's this war where they're edging closer and closer to getting involved with Russia, or for that matter, China. None of these things are necessary. All of these things are done for political reasons. And this quote unquote oath that many of the military people take on some levels is being violated by the country that they take that oath to. I hope I'm making sense with that. It's unfortunate. The moment that somebody says, yes, I'm willing to give my life for my country, okay. But that is not a one-way responsibility. That is also a responsibility of the state. When we're talking about Ukraine, for example, and we're pointing out, so you use all of these people in this fool's errand of invading Kursk when you had no real political objectives or military objectives in Kursk. Okay, that's a violation of your responsibility to your military people. Not all of them are Nazis, by the way, who've decided, or the very least were a press gang into the military, and that you've effectively used for political propaganda exercise. The state can say, well, hey, we needed these people for the propaganda exercise because if we don't get the money for the war stops. Okay, then that should give you an indication that the war should stop. Not that you should do propaganda exercises using the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in that propaganda exercise. I hope I'm trying to make a point with that. This oath that military people take is not one way. It's not singular, or at the very least it shouldn't be, where they take responsibility to give their life to the state. But the state has no responsibility to use that life honorably, responsibly, as opposed to wars that are completely unnecessary. So, yes, happy Memorial Day. And shout out to all the people for service. My cousin was in the military. My mom's, the man my mom got together with was in the military for a short stint. Meaning we have family. My ex-wife, her brother was in the military. So, yeah, I guess my point is there's an experience with this. Alexander G, thank you for doing these live streams, Jamal. Best wishes to you from your white Norwegian native subscriber. Dude, your race in no way matters to me in the least. Rat Kid nor Norwegian brother Alexander challenged me. Oh, that is funny. That is funny. It was this one, Lab 66. China and Russia are admired for their degree and morality. These two countries do not need to maintain any ties with the fascist entity and undermine goodwill forward them around the world as a result. I mean, that's truer now than it was then. I mean, if you were China, I mean, think of what China did for the moment. As opposed to taking, let's say, a Soviet model, they have what they call communism with Chinese characteristics, right? And effectively, they put a leash on capitalism and rode it like a horse. That's what they did. They were like, all right, we're going to have this communist government, but we acknowledge that capitalism has the capability of making a lot of wealth. It may be in the hands of a few, but damn it, it can make a lot of wealth. So let's do that while maintaining the communist government. So we're going to have no ties where you have inroads into our government. We are going to retain this communist mentality of planned society over the course of time and everything else. We're going to do that. We're going to keep the reins, but we're going to ride that horse. And so what were they able to do? They were able to make a ton of money riding that horse. They were able to make a ton of money making all sorts of billionaires, massive banks. I mean, if you look at the number of billionaires and where they are, China. You look at the number of the top banks, China. You look at all of these projects that they have eventually put through, these industrial scale projects, again, China. Like, they've done something different. There we are. I'm back up. I want to bring in my guest. Hopefully that didn't go too long. I do want to say Oliver Hardway. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. But let me bring in my guest, Mark Sleboda. My mic was down for a little bit. I don't know how long it was down. Hopefully it was only a few seconds before I noticed it. But Mark Sleboda, International Relations, Security Analyst, good friend of this channel. Mark, how you doing today, man? You doing all right?
Tomorrow, I'm alive. Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
It is always an honor and a pleasure to have you. One of my audience members complained that I didn't do chats until the end. So between my guests, I tried to make a special attention to do so. But Mark, interesting news coming out of the West. Apparently, we are aghast by the number of people that were killed in this hellfire that was rained down on Kiev recently. Now we ignore the fact that Israel is bombing schools, burning kids alive. I can show the video. I think I showed it earlier today. But Trump is outraged by Russia. He says Putin is going crazy, and he doesn't quite get why. I want to show you something, though, for this that I think it's super interesting. So when Trump was asked about this, all right, so this part, this is the follow-up to what the reporter asked him when he says, I think Putin has gone crazy. Listen to what he says, because I think this gives a little context to what's going on with Trump. Right here.
Can I follow up on that? A Russian commander reportedly said that Putin was almost caught in the middle of a drone attack from Ukraine. So do you have any...
I haven't heard that, but maybe that would be a reason. I don't know, but I have not heard that.
So Putin is nearly caught up in a drone attack. Well, Trump has heard about, apparently, the hellfire that was rained down on Kiev and some other cities in Ukraine. I mean, it's war after all, right? He did not hear about that part. And so, there's always this question of, okay, what is in Trump's mind? And I think what matters in his mind seems to be less than who's talking to him and giving him and providing him information. Give me your take on that, by the way. What is your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I think it's really rich for anyone to seriously entertain Trump calling anyone else in the world crazy. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, second of all, my first thought with regards to that is, what the hell is Tulsi Gabbard doing? Tulsi Gabbard is supposed to be the director of national intelligence. Or is Trump just not, reading or listening to even his intelligence briefing, or are they not giving him that information? And if not Tulsi, then why the hell not, right? His claim of ignorance there, I haven't heard much from Tulsi in a while, right? I don't necessarily expect to as DNI. I mean, that's a quiet behind the scenes role. But when the president doesn't know the most basic facts, i.e. that the Kiev regime launched more than 1,000 drones over several days with an extremely significant number for such attacks directed at Moscow, that also, by the way, killed civilians. Not right. Now, first of all, I have to say that neither side is systemically targeting civilians. Let's make that clear. I mean, all one has to do, not on a mass scale. Let me preface that. The Kiev regime has targeted civilians, but not on a truly mass scale, right? One only has to look at what the U.S. funded, Israeli government is doing in Gaza to what real civilian casualties, where the government not only does not care at all about proportionality, but is outright targeting civilians looks like, right? That is Gaza. Second of all, if Russia launches several hundred drones and up to 100 missiles, and there's a purported, right, 13 civilian casualties. And I've heard different numbers. The first I heard there was a number injured and then killed. So does that include, I don't know, civilian workers at the Antonov drone factory, which is what Russia hit more than 20 times, according to videos we have actually seen. First of all, whatever the Kiev regime claims about interceptions, their air defense interceptions of Russian drones and missiles, I mean, it has always been nonsense, and it is still nonsense, right? And we know that because videos from on the ground in Ukraine released online show 20 strikes in a row hitting this Antonov. It was previously in airplane factory. Now it is being used, was being used, I should say, to produce drones. And there were 20 strikes in a row recorded hitting that factory. That's the big flaming red fires. What you're showing right now is another interesting, because another of the big targets in the Kiev was in Kiev itself was the Kiev regime's remaining U.S. Patriot system launchers. And what we see there is the Patriot first trying to intercept, and then we see what is probably a combination first of trying to defend itself, and then there's another video that shows an automated release of all of its remaining ammunition, which is what it's supposed to do right before it gets hit, so that ammunition isn't hit on the ground, right, creating a much larger explosion. So definitely, we don't know the precise numbers. I mean, the Kiev regime is never going to tell us exactly how many Patriot launchers, associated radar systems, and control systems are hit in any given strike. But I think we can be pretty sure that at the very minimum, where they're one launcher less, right? Probably significantly more. So Russia was specifically targeting military industrial facilities and air defense facilities. And the military industrial facilities, drone factories, was their direct response, right? Or was presented as a direct response by the Kremlin for over 1,000 drone strikes on Russia over 3 days, including a significant number targeting Moscow. And it has to be said that there's a world of difference in the effectiveness between the Kiev regime's long-range strikes and Russia's long-range strikes, right? Kiev is certainly showing quantity, not quality, quantity. They're releasing large numbers of drones, and we have to presume that this is done with Western assistance, right? They're not launching hundreds of long-range strike drones and targeting, Moscow and other places deep into Russia without active Western intelligence targeting satellite and assistance. So, first of all, I don't know, again, who's informing Trump, but that was almost certainly collated. That attack was almost certainly operated and probably planned with, U.S. intelligence help. So that
He seems to be either
the effectiveness is much less, right? It's much harder to hide significant effects of Ukrainian strikes on Russia than the other way around, because Russia doesn't have, contrary to Western perception, Russia doesn't have a dictatorial regime that imprisons people for posting images on social media of these strikes and the media reporting on them and the like, right? Where you face either prison or being immediately sent to the front yourself when they come to your door over that matter. So, in Ukraine, it is much less likely to get that video evidence. Certainly the Western mainstream media never reports on it. I mean, they're just never ever going to acknowledge, except when it creates this emotional furor, this hellfire. So if Russia launches hundreds of drones and nearly 100 cruise missiles, right? The day before was Iskander missiles, and we're talking, let's say that a maximum of 13 civilian casualties was hit, right? In military terms, that is perfectly acceptable collateral damage for hundreds of strikes, right? That is, right? I mean, collateral damage is never a good thing, right? The goal is never to kill civilians, but you're not targeting civilians. And it is very likely that at least some of those civilian casualties were a result of the Kiev regime's air defense falling on their own city. I mean, because that is a very real thing. We've seen that many times in this conflict. And they're never going to, of course, differentiate which is between, we accidentally killed our own, our supposed own people, with our air defense missiles going awry or falling or intercepting and resulting in debris falling down and the like. Russia tends to when Russia lies, when the Russian government lies, and it does, right? It's a war, right? Propaganda is a thing. It tends to do so by omission, right? It just doesn't tell you. It usually doesn't present direct falsehoods to a much more insignificant, degree than the Kiev regime. So when there are effects on Russia, right? Or when, let's say, Russian air defense results in, civilian casualties on its own side, which has happened. It is, electronic warfare diverts drones and they hit a civilian building that may not have been intended to. Almost always, it later comes, the Russian government may not address it directly, but it then comes out in Russian media and Telegram channels quietly. Not blaring across the headlines. And when that happens, I always say so, right? Because I'm maybe not objective in my position on this conflict, but I try to stay objective in my analysis, which is
reality is reality.
Another thing entirely. There's an exchange of long range strikes. Now, would Russia have done long range strikes anyway, targeting Kiev regime's air defense and drone if it hadn't been preceded by this? Yes, sure, probably, right? But it makes it very convenient, right? They can, of course, and it is legitimate to claim that it was a response that immediately followed the Kiev regime's, repeated drone strikes. And they launched hundreds of drone strikes as foreign leaders were arriving for the May 9th victory parade, right? They did this again. So this Putin's helicopter, Putin was visiting the Kursk region for the first time after the Kiev regime forces had been completely driven out. And there was a drone swarm that attacked, right? And it is likely that they had intelligence, and it was not a coincidence. And it is likely that some of that was Western intelligence, that Putin was coming.
Basically, they tried to assassinate Vladimir
Putin. It is not 100%, right? I can't say that as a matter of fact, but there is a distinct likelihood that at least the Kiev regime and possibly Western governments just attempted to assassinate the Russian president. It is a distinct possibility. And so when Trump goes all off, Russia is crazy, and in response, he hits, the air defense you provided and a military industrial factory that was producing the drones that were likely used in the attacks on Russia, including on Moscow and including on the president. That is such a proportionate, reasonable response, right? However, 13 civilian casualties and 100 strikes, even if we accept that at face value, that is a perfectly 100% legitimate military strike. No questions, no and/ors, buts. Anything else is just emotive hand-wringing that our proxy poked the bear again and got ringed in response.
I mean, Mark, I feel like even having to answer this seems outlandish, considering Donald Trump has been giving 80% to Israel, who just murdered like 100 people over the 24 hours.
He himself launched 1,000 airstrikes on Yemen. How many civilians were killed in Yemen? No one ever
put it on Twitter. By the way, chest thumped on Twitter about civilians being murdered in Yemen, saying, look at these people that we just killed. All of them were just civilians. Yeah. So it's a bit rich for Trump.
They took out an entire building full of civilians to get one guy.
One guy.
One guy.
One guy.
Now, go ahead and try the moralizing because, talk to the hand. Right?
Yeah,
That's all
yeah, that's what I mean, right? But I'm like, okay, this is a bit outrageous. That this is what they,
moralizing.
yeah,
It's
they're
sickening.
locking
It's
in on.
sickening. It's just noise. We know the U.S. does it, has done it for decades. Whatever.
Going after Putin is explosive.
Oh,
Meaning,
yeah.
if the Russian government believes that, that's explosive.
Well, it has to be said that the Kiev regime's military intelligence chief, right, Kyrylu, I like the dark Budana, he outright said that they have attempted to kill Putin, to assassinate Putin several times already over the last 3 years, and that has failed.
Do they know
Right.
what would happen to Ukraine if they did that?
Yeah, there
Like,
would
do
be
they
no
know the
more, there
rage?
would be no more Ukraine. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there would not be any question, right? I mean, again, they never the Western media and its Manichaean, ridiculous 6th grade level reporting on Russia and Putin and the like. Oh, Putin is the evil dictator villain. Oh, if we were only rid of Putin, then everything would be okay. Oh my God, Putin is a rational, pragmatic, cautious, realist when it comes to these things.
Right.
Whoever replaces him would be Medvedev, right? I mean, I don't know
Have you
if
seen
you've
the
pointed out.
tweets?
Medvedev just posted on his Twitter account a map of Ukraine at the end of the special military operation, where he presented as what is not part of a buffer zone. And it's a tiny little strip of Western Ukraine. It's not even all of Galicia. It's a tiny little strip of Galicia left at the end. Yeah, you really want that? I mean, really? Okay, all right. I mean,
Yeah.
or someone of the like. Reportedly, according to Bloomberg, the Trump administration, who are posing as moderators, disinterested moderators in negotiations that are pushing between their proxy Kiev Putsch regime and Russia. They're complaining about the head of the Russian diplomatic team in the negotiations, Medinsky, who, by the way, was the head of the Russian diplomatic mission back in the original 2022 Istanbul. First in Minsk in Belarus, actually, and then in Istanbul talks that led to the FAW Istanbul communique that was always just another pull the blanket over Russia's eyes deal. But they said he's too hardline, right? And
He just represents the government.
So Trump, representing the U.S. proxy regime in Kiev, is attempting to dictate who the diplomats on the other side of the table are. The Russian response, at least on social media, was overwhelming. You don't want Medinsky? Send Medvedev.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, that brings up another question, the communique. So apparently Russia was going to send out what they required for peace terms. I don't even know why this is necessary because they've been saying it for 3 years.
Just say terms, right?
Terms of surrender. Yeah.
They're not yet unconditional terms, but next time they will be.
Well, according to Medvedev, next time it's a surrender, basically. It will be unconditional surrender or you make terms. Yeah. Those terms are not going to change, right? Like, that's why I didn't even see the point in this communique.
This is
ultimately
going through the motions. It's going through them. Everyone is going through the motions right now. Everyone knows. Maybe Trump doesn't know. I mean, because he seems really ill-informed or not understanding about anything. But everyone else in his administration knows. Even J.D. Vance said, well, it's unlikely to result in anything, right? The Europeans certainly know. Their threats to continually put NATO troops, European troops on the ground as soon as there is a ceasefire, guarantee that Russia will never accept it. I mean, that is if there was any question of it. The Kiev regime knows it. They're planning for several years of war. right? They're talking, for forever. Well, so it's Russia, by the way, and Russia certainly knows this is all going through the motions. This jaw means nothing. Everything. There's only two places that really matter. We'll doubtless continue talking about this nonsense because it's what drives the news and the headlines. And let's see what shocking thing Trump says today. I'm so sick of talking about the guy already. And we got another almost 4 more years at least to deal with him. Yeah. But there's only two things that matter. One is what is happening on the battlefield. And two, even more importantly, because this is a war of attrition, and a traditional war of attrition, if you want, or untraditional in some ways, and logistics. Everything is production and logistics. Right. And so the real battle going on is the battle of military-industrial complexes, which is the battle of Russia and a handful of allies now participating to some degree, North Korea to a considerable degree, Iran to a lesser degree, against the entirety of NATO, right? And all of NATO's major non-NATO allies, Japan, South Korea, and all of the other countries it can rope-a-dope into sending gear, whether that is Pakistan sending artillery shells, Israel, or vacuuming up the Russian-provided military equipment from the overthrown government in Syria from the new Al-Qaeda warlords in charge of the place. That's what has actually kept Biden arranged that, and that is what kept the Kiev regime in stock in equipment for over the winter, right? Up till now, that was a big part. Once again, this conflict. I mean, when you consider the amount of arms that were provided to the Kiev regime in Ukraine of Soviet legacy equipment from across the former Warsaw Pact and Soviet Union that was provided, and now once again we have this military equipment provided by the new Al-Qaeda, overlords of Syria. Mm-hmm. A lot of this conflict, Russia has been spent fighting its own military equipment, whether that's Russian or Soviet legacy that the West, has been throwing at Russia, which, will probably raise some foreign policy questioning about Russia's military export strategy at the end of this. Yeah, but that's where it's battle of the military industrial complexes, and Russia is winning it handily. Not according to me, right? A Russian analyst, a Russian propagandist, if you will, but according to the Secretary General of NATO, Tutti Frutti, Mark Rutte himself, who continually harps that Russia is outproducing all of NATO put together by 4 to 5 times of the type of munitions and armaments needed for this type of artillery-heavy, land-centric conflict. And if you didn't need to push that home, or if you were relying on the Western mainstream media and the Kiev regime's claims, that's okay, we don't have anything else, but we've got drones, and drones is the future, and we'll win this war in drones. Both the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post reported in the last week that Russia, actually it turns out that Russia is ahead of the Kiev regime in drones, both in again, not just the Kiev regime, but all of what NATO supplies the Kiev regime in drones, both in quantity and in quality and effective use on the battlefield. In particular, the Washington Post was pointing out Russia's now very large, extensive use and very effective use of fiber optic drones. These drones that are guided by seemingly impossibly, right? It's always hard to wrap your head around. Yeah, about a tiny fiber optic wire that it can have lengths of 20 kilometers of more. I've seen the pictures of the battlefields when the light hits it right, you can see webs of fiber optic cables overhead like a web from so many fiber optic drones just covering the sky, or on the ground covering fields. I've also seen a Kiev regime, a Ukrainian military vehicle, with its tire completely entangled in hundreds, if not thousands, of fiber optic cables that it had run over. These things are incredibly effective. They're used, because they're first and foremost because they are absolutely immune to electronic warfare jamming, which is another area which, by the way, Russia has an edge, but a big edge over anything that NATO can provide as well. But these are 100% immune to that, and they provide a stronger, more reliable signal. Even without the electronic warfare jamming. That's why you get so many just absolutely Hollywood quality shots of FPV drones now flying directly into APCs and the like, because of the strength of the signal with that fiber optic cable. The video is almost an afterthought, but it's something that is there as well. So yes, as the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post admitted, yes, Russia is winning the drone war too. Putin's brutal drone war, as they termed it in the Western media. Drones are brutal when they're, of course, used by Russia, and heroic, life-saving drones. Of course, when it's drones we've provided the Kiev, right?
Heroic drones. You mentioned Syria. I have to hit Syria before I let you go, because I want to hit the battlefield, but I want to also hit Syria. There were reports that there were attacks on the Russian base in Tartarus, I believe it's called. Yeah, in Syria. And apparently these were jihadis. I don't think it's a coincidence that there's a jihadist government, that Trump just shook the man's hand, told him, hey, great job, great beard. The guy looks tough history, whatever the hell he said, good looking.
Yeah. Anything but saying, I'm shaking hands with the former leader of both Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, who was wanted with posters for a $10 million bounty by the United States, even during the Biden administration.
The hand that I've shaked has used to chop somebody's head off.
Yeah,
that's
but
what
let's do far moralizing about dead people again, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I know exactly right. But is it a coincidence that that base comes under? Now, there are two parts to this. One, Russians were protecting the ally community that was being slaughtered by his dogs in Syria. There's that.
Yeah.
Meaning they were housing them at that military base.
Yes.
Does it have more to do with that? It's like, hey, how dare you protect these innocent people that we want to chop their heads off? Or is it, yay, I got a call from Trump that we need to put more pressure on Russia, and we don't want them in Syria in the first place, or for that matter, his European backers, that we don't want Russia here in the first place, so put pressure on the base. I mean, granted, there's no way, you can know as a flat fact, but where does your mind go when you're seeing something like this? Because it's a bit random that they're just all of a sudden hitting a Russian base.
Okay, so this was May 20th, and they hit a Russian base, right? They hit an outpost on the outskirts. Drones were involved, right? They used drones and they used snipers. And reportedly, 2 Russian soldiers were killed and 4 to 5 injured, and at least 2 of the jihadis were killed. So a terrorist group claimed responsibility. The group is Soraya Birkin al-Farat, the Euphrates Volcano Brigades, right? They are a group directly affiliated with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The 2 killed were reported former members of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, right? Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is just Al-Qaeda rebranded, right? When it came to dominate the entirety of the jihadi forces that for years were holding out in northern Idlib, right? And then were brought in and took over Syria with Turkish and Western help.
Right.
So both of them were part of Hayat, and the new leader is the new, warlord of Syria is the terrorist warlord. Al-Julani was the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, right? So both of the two were killed, were members of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's special unit known as the Red Bands, right? Some type of elite jihadi special forces, right? So what do we know there? All right. So first of all, obviously, it is extremely unlikely that this is some rogue element that was acting without Julani's knowledge and permission. That's the same thing he claimed as the jihadis, ethnically cleanse and commit genocide, killing hundreds, if not thousands, of Alawites and Syrian Christians on the coast over the last couple of months, right? That which has resulted in all of these refugees hiding and still, being protected within the Russian base there. So, is this a change in position from Erdogan, right? Because Erdogan seems,
Interesting,
by all accounts, to have previously wanted Russia to remain there, right? That's possible. I don't know that, right? I think that is probably the less likely position.
Oh, Mark, I didn't even think of that. Please,
is it
going.
Julani simply no longer agreeing with Erdogan, right? Because he's Erdogan's proxy, Al-Qaeda is his proxy now governing Syria, but eventually, he's going to have his own desires, right, and plans that may conflict with Erdogan. Or is this the British or the Americans, right? Or a far outside possibility, the Israelis, I guess. I don't think it was the Israelis. I think they also have an interest actually now in Russia remaining in bases there. So I think it's entirely possible that this is British or U.S. intelligence, right, pushing some members of Julani's, pushing Julani to send a further signal, a further poke at the Russians. I think that's a distinct possibility. We don't know for sure, right?
Yeah.
But I find it very unlikely that Julani did not know or did not, at the very least, green light. And then you just have to ask, well, then who's behind Julani in this particular situation? Is it Erdogan? I think is an outside possibility, or is it more likely the British or the Americans? And I got to be perfectly honest. I think Russia should pull out of these bases. I think they should have already done so, right? You just can't possibly, whatever advantages they have, signals intelligence wise, from radars and whatever in these bases, and the ability to use them as air bases and naval bases at Tartus, I think is outweighed by the fact of them existing in an essentially an Islamic State, an Al-Qaeda, former ISIS, new Islamic State where Syria used to be. I think you can't maintain it. Now, I do think that the Russian government should evacuate all of the Syrian Alawites and Christians and others, right? Other minorities, other people, even if they're Sunnis and they're not Islamists, anyone who wants to get out and not face the genocide that is still raging outside of Russia's military bases in Syria, they should get them out, they should evacuate them, and they should provide them all with Russian citizenship. That is my personal belief.
Is Moscow willing to do that, though?
Obviously, there's diplomatic concerns, but I think we will, at the very least, see some type of eased or expedited citizenship at some point down the line. It's possible that it's already happening now, but if they got Assad and his family out, well, then they can extend that help a little bit to the Syrian people who were left behind when Assad fled the country with Al-Qaeda's takeover. That's my personal opinion, very strongly held. in that
And it's
regard.
already a diplomatic kerfuffle because they want to side back to
Yes.
effectively execute him. And Russia says no. So I feel you. I guess my thought is, I agree with you on this, by the way. I agree with you. If they leave those people there, those people are going to be slaughtered. Full
Yeah.
stop. The last thing I want to turn to is what's taking place on the battlefield. So I've been seeing Russia taking village after village after village. That here, there goes the belief that drones can somehow replace military power. Because it doesn't seem like those drones are able to hold the line for.
It doesn't matter. I mean, the drones, considering that the Kiev regime has a dearth of artillery and air power and tanks and everything else at the battlefield now. With that in mind, the Kiev regime is doing a good job with what drones it has, right? It uses them, the FPV drones, they're deadly. Numbers as high as 75%, so in the mid 70s of Russian casualties come from FPV drones. Yes,
Whoa.
yes. Yeah, so 70% from drones, and then another 20% from artillery and other types of long-range strikes, and 4% from small arms fire, from actual guns. 4%.
So you never really see the person that killed you.
Exactly. But that's been the story for most of this conflict, right? The videos we see on the Telegram channels of the of the small arms combat, of storming trenches and knife fights, that is that 4%, just to keep in mind. So, I mean, they're doing a good job with what they have. I'm always amazed that the Kiev regime is able to keep its forces still fighting. I mean, it's not a surprise with the Banderite fascist ideologicals, Azov and Aidar and all of these others. There's too numerous to name, but there's a large number of conscripts, right, with no training, just able to hold trenches and they're still able, to keep all of their forces from crumbling all the time, and that's always amazing to me. So they're doing a good job. But at the end of the day, Russia has more drones, right? And they have better drones and a wider variety of strike drones, Lancets, Orlans, reconnaissance drones. They have just more and a better quality and better variety of drones, right, for more purposes. And they've got everything else on top of that. The air power, the FABs, the electronic warfare advantage, everything.
Those things are devastating. Those FAB bombs.
Yeah.
I'm
So
seeing-
it's not a surprise. But the Western mainstream media will stay in denial, and they'll continue to talk about crawling forward inches and stalemate until Russia takes some particularly strategic location. They just ignore that, right? In the middle of May, right? I don't have numbers for every day and everything, but there were at least 3 days in the middle of May. We're not even out of May yet. So a little over a week ago, where I noticed that I took a look at the numbers, and Russia was taking 31 square kilometers a day.
That's what I mean.
Right? Not all in one
numbers
place, right? Forward everywhere, right? But it's significant in a conflict like this, in a war of attrition. It's still a war of attrition, but the war of attrition, the improvement of positions is happening much faster than it was before. The Kiev regime's game of plug whenever there's a hole is running out of effectiveness. They just can't defend everywhere it runs now. Russia is, they've got a big pocket that they are collapsing, both in the area around Pokrovsk and, even more importantly, in the Liman, Kupiansk area. There's a big pocket being collapsed there, with the possibilities of cauldrons or near cauldrons developing. And the Western media is making a big deal out of 50,000 troops poised in Kharkov, right? That had previously been involved in retaking Kursk, and now they're being redirected to Kharkov. Putin is about to march on Kharkov city. No, 50,000 troops. You need, at the very minimum, 200, 300, more troops, 100,000 troops, right, to take a city, right? And Kharkov is Ukraine's second largest city. right? So 50,000 troops, no. Now, it's possible that that is a preparatory force, and if the Kiev regime doesn't rush significant amounts of reinforces, and Russia senses a weakness, that in the then there will be a surge, and that 50,000 will quickly climb. But we'll see that happen. That won't be. We'll hear about that. That won't be something. But right now, no. Russia is not threatening to take Kharkov. They're just improving their positions. Putin announced. Right, and he's announced buffer zone before, but now he's deadly serious. Right, a buffer zone on the other side of Bryansk, Kursk, and Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions, which approximates to Sumy, Chornigov, and Kharkov region. So that is what is going on right now. Now, is it just going to be a buffer zone? Well, for now, right? But again, as things happen, right? If you'll notice that the Russian diplomats, Medinsky, etc., by multiple accounts now, both Russian and Ukrainian, said, well, if you don't agree to evacuate these 4 regions now, then it will be 5. And then they said, no, it was 8. Well, if you take 5 and you add Kharkov and Sumy and Chornigov to that, well, then that's 8. Without even counting Odessa, Nikolaev, and Dnipropetrovsk. And by the way, Russia has passed into, over the last week, pretty much definitively into the Dnipropetrovsk region. Right, they crossed the border into Dnipropetrovsk, raised some flags, nothing big yet, but that's entering steppe area there, which is not as far harder to defend from an opponent that has air power and long range advantages like Russia does than the tight urban agglomerations and hilly forested areas of the Donbass. So that will be another area that Russia will be expanding into now much faster. So that is the front. Everywhere along the front, Russia is advancing. There really is nowhere along the front that they're not advancing. They've supposedly in the past 2 weeks even crossed the Dnieper in hundreds of small boats, and are, whether that is a pressure campaign, right, simply to force the Kiev regime to keep some troops there to spread them out even thinner. Again, everything depends. Everything is fluid, right? It's hard to have strategic surprise when both sides have 24/7 satellite and drone reconnaissance. So the way you get around that is by keeping your forces fluid, right? So that whenever there is a weakness, you could rapidly surge them into an area, which means you don't make one offensive plan. You make 5 of them and maybe end up using 2 of them, depending on how things develop, a large part what your opponent does on the ground, right? When you're looking for those holes. And the key to that is 2 things. 1, having enough manpower, which Russia obviously has now. And 2, having an extremely developed logistics system that can move the equipment, the fuel, the munitions, everything that's needed then for a rapid movement of troops in that direction. And Russia has that as well. So that is what, that is the future of warfare. That is how you, for the moment, get around 24/7 satellite surveillance, where surprise is certainly at the strategic level, even at the tactical level, becomes very difficult, is by keeping your forces, it sounds almost like something Sun Tzu would say, but keep them like water, keep them fluid, able to flow wherever, there is a proverbial hole in the dam in which to surge into.
Yeah, there's no other way to do it. I mean, everybody can see what you're doing. You put 10 troops together, everybody already knows.
And immediately get hit by drones and other forms of long-range strikes on either side. That's why everything is so much small. When there's large armies, but there's actually usually very small numbers of actual infantry, or combat forces along the front lines actually engaged in what you would consider close quarters combat. Very
So
small
wait a minute.
numbers.
They
Why?
can't see
Because any
infantry.
concentration of troops can be hit by the drones and the long range strikes.
But wouldn't that be true for infantry also? Not infantry, I'm
Sure.
sorry. Or artillery? Like meaning
Sure.
the people who are doing these artillery or drone swarms and those type of things, don't they have to organize in order to do those things? Or
Sure. Sure.
they shoot
Artillery
and
has
move.
to stay spread out and hidden and constantly moving as well, right? Which it helps because you'll notice that like these American provided howitzers, the 777s and everything, they're towed. Which makes them incredibly less efficient in this type of combat, where the vast majority of the Russian artillery pieces are self-propelled, which enables them to move around quite a bit, to a higher, significant higher degree. So, mobility
Like
of
horses, like in the old days, or being by trucks.
By trucks. Yeah,
Okay.
not horses. Yeah, but by the way, both sides. You've seen probably headlines of the Western media. Oh, Putin's completely out of tanks and is vehicles and is using donkeys, or he's so out of tanks they're using motorcycles. And then I just saw the reports this week. Right?
These
are specific uses where these work better in the modern circumstances,
Exactly.
in specific locations, in specific, purposes. And then, but the headlines, oh, the Kiev regime has a new innovative unit using motorcycles. And they're reinventing old forms of combat and have come up with the logical leap of using donkeys in certain types of hilly terrain and forested areas to get supplies in and everything like this. And I know the media is such a whore. It's such a whore, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's the our glorious leader, their evil dictatorial whatever, our glorious self-sacrificing heroic armed forces, their evil, incompetent, brutal, terrorizing orcs. It's the same thing again and again and again.
The way we talk about it. I mean, it's just the way our media works. I mean, it's taken me a while to get used to it.
Yeah, you have to read it, right? If you're a journalist, an analyst, but the goal is to filter it and to filter out all of that noise and look for the kernels of admissions of truth, or finally admissions of truth, that you can find in it and use to construct not just an argument, but a full picture of what is going on, right?
Sumy and Chasov Yar. So, from my understanding, Chasov Yar is nearly taken in its entirety. Sumy.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've been saying that for months now. So, and it is more true than it was months ago. But don't expect Chasov Yar to be completely taken. Much like Tourette's, the Kiev regime will continue to be throwing counterattacks to try to hold and retake it and obscure the issue of exactly how much they've been driven out of so long. But my understanding from credible reports is that the center of Chasov Yar was taken a week ago. The Citadel area, the high-rise section, but it's still not 100%, right?
Still fighting.
And they will always surge counterattacks in to avoid those narrative headlines of Chasov Yar falling, to obscure the issue for as long as possible. They don't mind sacrificing people's lives just for that political purpose. They have done it continually. They will continue to do it.
Sumy, that seems to be also being pressured at this point. I mean, the soldiers that were coming out of Kursk seem to have started to bank around Sumy with the idea of potentially going after Sumy city. Do you see that taking place? I mean, because this is the buffer zone, right? And that's
all right, so first it's going to be a buffer zone, right? And important staging areas for the Kiev regime, like Yanakivka and other cities, towns there will be the targets right now. Is somewhere down the line, might Sumy city itself, the capital city of the Sumy region, be targeted? Yes, at some point down the line. That point is not now. That point is not.
Buffer zones often need buffer zones.
Buffer zones can turn into many other things, right? But
Right.
they're not right now. Now they are improving of positions, right? They are creating a buffer zone. It has to be. One of the things that escapes notice, it's not just about the incursions and the raids into Belgorod and Kursk and Bryansk. It is also, if you take a look at the distances involved in these long-range drone strikes, it is principally out of a salient region in Sumy, from which the majority of these long-range strikes capable of reaching Moscow and that far into Russia are being launched from. So it's not just to create a buffer on the ground, but it's also to create a buffer against drones and other potential long-range strikes.
This is what Lavrov said, right?
That's why they're so hot on it right now after the drone attacks, however ineffectively, that reached, Moscow and the like. It's to push them back out of drone. And the problem with that is drone range is always improving. I mean, that's been a continuance, throughout the course of this conflict. But always good to make it as hard as possible for them, in that eventuality. Yeah.
Mark, man, you are fantastic. Thank you for this. I mean, a great breakdown. But you always give great breakdowns, and the audience at this point have come to expect a great breakdown for you whenever you come on. And we have a damn good crowd. We have over 1,300 people here today.
Well, I'm going to have to change my tactics and come on and say, oh, we're going to win in 2 months. It's all but over next time I come on or something like that. It's all end game.
No, you have been practical. You've explained this stuff very well. You've been right most of the time. So no, man, I've appreciated you, and the audience appreciates you. When I say damn good analyst or one of the best in the business, I mean it. Mark Sleboda, he's an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. Check him out on the Substack. Definitely check that out. Has that come out yet?
This week. We had a few things to iron out, but it will be out this week. And Jamarl, may I just say that entirely undue flattery will get you everywhere.
It is more than due. Look, my mom can tell you I don't say this stuff if I don't mean it. I will just say nothing. In this case, I actually do mean it. Your analysis has been spot on. And this goes back for 3 years, and me covering this for 3 years. And so it's not like I'm popping in with you every,
11 years.
8 months. Yeah.
11 years. We've been covering this for 11 years, Jamarl. This
It's been 11 years. Wait a minute. Well, I was at the radio station for 5. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's been 8 around
2014. I've been talking about this since 2014.
Oh, wow. Fair enough. I guess, but that makes my point even more so. You've been consistent over the course of all of those years, which is not easy, as you say. Some people have been screaming that the war's supposed to be over 2 years.
Hey,
3 years ago.
Every side needs cheerleaders too. So I mean, we can have a laugh, but cheerleaders, I've heard someone tell me in comments before, when we want to find out what's really going on the ground, I look to you or Brian Berletic or some other people like that, and I turn to some other people when I want to feel good.
Mark, man,
that is useful too. That is useful too. We got to have.
Yeah, you need your cheerleaders, I suppose. I just want the reality of what's happening. Like a clear eye is better than a jaded eye, even if it's not seeing the greatest of things. Right? I want to know the bus is coming. Yeah. Thank you, my man. You be safe, Mark. Have a good one. Okay.
Cheers.
All right, Mark Sleboda, my man. All of the flattery is due from my point of view. He has been consistent. If you look over the course of all of these interviews, oh, Jesus, goes back. I started in 2020. We're in 2025. So, for the last 5-6 years. Wow. Just amazing. I want to bring on my next guest, though. She is here. And I am super interested in this conversation. I don't get the opportunity to talk to her often, so I'm always happy when she joins me. Coleen Rowley. She is a lawyer, retired FBI agent, former MPLS legal counsel who wrote the memo about the FBI's pre-9/11 failures and testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee. She was also Democratic Farmer Labor Party candidate for Congress in Minnesota. Coleen, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Yeah, happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day indeed. As I told the audience, shout out to all the veterans and all those people who gave their lives so the country was willing to. It wagged a finger at the government, and I can't say wagged a finger strongly enough for the government misusing those lives. I think that responsibility should go both ways. If the person is willing, and I say this as having family. My cousin was in the military. My wife's or ex-wife's brother was in the military. Hell, he was in the military while we were married. So, you know, it's like these people dedicate their lives to the country, and we should have a country that uses them responsibly. I don't think that's the way we do it. No, please respond to that.
Yeah, most recently, I would recommend this interview led by Veterans for Peace and some other peace groups done outside the United Nations in New York, where they are leading a fast against genocide. I'm part of it too here in Minnesota. Our local chapter of Veterans for Peace has, we started, this is day 5, and we've been fasting on 250 calories a day, which is not much. I can tell you, I looked up some calories, a banana and an apple, maybe. This is day 5. I've lost over 5 pounds already by this fasting. But the Veterans for Peace in this video that they announced that this initiative had some really good, what you just talked about. Veterans who have been on the inside, who have seen the Smedley Butler war racket, and now realize that the United States is complicit in the genocide, Israel's genocide of Palestinians, that, we can hardly watch. So anyway, I'm part of that fast against genocide, which I think is really appropriate to mention on Memorial Day. We want to remember the sacrifices. And unfortunately, the irony is that, we're fasting here in a land where many of us are overweight. We have problems. 40% of people have type 2 diabetes. I mean, it's like unbelievable. And the poor little children that are turning into skeletons and babies, they say thousands of babies are dying. Israel is using food as a weapon now. They're taunting them. Oh, here's some food. Come get it. Almost the same way, Gabor Mate mentioned this, almost the same way as the Nazis lured the Jews onto the trains that went to concentration camps by giving them a couple loaves of bread. And that's what Israel is doing now in Gaza. It's just sickening and horrible, but we're doing that. And the other thing, I know you wanted to talk about the FBI, but I will just mention one other project that I'm leading. But we have a couple hundred at least, signers of Taxpayers Against Genocide class action. This was started in California, and then of course there's 100 and some districts in the United States. So each district is different. And it turns out in Minnesota that all of our congresspersons, with the exception of one, Ilhan Omar, and both of our senators, Klobuchar and Tina Smith, all voted to give $26 billion to arm Israel's genocide last year. So we started a class action and we filed it on May 12th. So it's officially filed class action in Minnesota, District of Minnesota. And now today, or tomorrow, actually, I've got to call the clerk of court and find out how we officially serve all of our congresspersons and senators, again, with the exception of Ilhan Omar.
That is fascinating. Oh, that is fascinating. And you're absolutely right. It is hard to, there's food everywhere in America. And oftentimes it's, McDonald's, Burger King, it's done for profit. So they have these huge sizes. You may get 250 calories in a soda, maybe, at like 12 ounces, if that. And so I'm trying to put it in context for people to realize how little the 250 calorie thing is, what that sacrifice is that you're trying to do in order to bring attention to what we've been
Yeah,
doing.
you can't eat a McDonald's and have it. That's going to be way over 250
Nope.
calories.
One
Yeah,
French
you've
fry.
got to eat pretty much fruits and vegetables, like lettuce. The first 3-4 days, I ate a lot of lettuce. Lettuce has almost no calories. Of course, it doesn't do much for your body either, other than the nutrients. I found out because I exercise and I train for triathlons. I found out that I couldn't even bike on the exercise bike yesterday. I
Wow.
was a whole mile per hour slower. I just couldn't do it. My heart rate went up. I can, on an exercise bike, you can monitor your heart rate, and my pulse went up too high. But that's because lettuce doesn't do it for you. Lettuce has no energy. And the bad thing is, people in the United States, we eat way too much carbs and sugar,
Right.
starch and sugar, which I will say it does give you energy to exercise and everything, but we eat too much of it. And that's really the culprit for type 2 diabetes. So yeah, people generally do need to eat more fruits and vegetables, a lot more, and a lot less carbs and sugar. But we're doing the fast for 40 days. And when I committed to it, you had to sign up nationally. When I committed to it, I said, I don't know if I can do it 40 days. You have to be pretty overweight to do this kind of a thing for 40 days. If I was a little overweight, but I said, maybe I don't know if I can do it. I will do it as long as I can. And I'll tell you what, it's 5 days now of 250 calories a day is pretty darn difficult.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've been in a hospital where they wouldn't allow me to eat, or you could only have like broth. You're climbing up the walls. Like get weak, your body. My point is, it's a sacrifice. And you guys are making that sacrifice for damn good reasons. For one, since we were talking about this, you have Israel continue to make the excuse, well, the reason we're starving the Palestinians is because, Hamas keeps stealing their food, which is pretty outrageous, right? So you get this article to come out right here. World Food Program, we have not seen any evidence that Hamas is stealing humanitarian aid.
Mm-hmm.
The UN Organization Executive Director, Cindy McCain, told U.S. broadcaster CBS. And of course, it gets worse to the bombings that were taking place where they were burning children alive. And some of these bombings, I think I showed this video earlier today, where they effectively bombed a school. And as they were bombing the school, you can actually see a little girl inside trying to find a way out. You have Home Security Secretary Noam praying at the wall, meaning these two things are happening nearly simultaneously. Isn't that amazing? Just astonishing. America first, by the way. America first. And it gets even worse. Donald Trump is pretending, or let's say the media is pretending, that there's a split between Trump and Israel, while simultaneously Trump initiates this plan where they're using like these kind of commercial food representatives mixed with the military in order to use food as a weapon to force the Palestinians into a concentration camp. As you pointed out, it's very similar to the Nazis using food in order to compel them to bus people to concentration camps. This stuff is disgusting. The guy who was supposed to be running that program not a dove, by the way, resigned in protest saying, what you guys are doing is never going to work, especially under any kind of humanitarian grounds, because you're effectively, A, trying to make a profit off of it, and B, using people's needs in order to push their behavior into these kind of pins, or for that matter, to try to ethnically cleanse them out the country. It's disgusting. I agree with you. I agree with you. I didn't bring you off of that. I do appreciate what you're doing, though. I guess that's my point. It is very disgusting. To move over to Ken Klippenstein, I don't know if the audience knows this, but Ken published the dossier of the guy who killed those two people at the Israeli embassy. Rodriguez, I think his name is. After Ken published the manifesto, Ken gets a visit from the FBI. Now, this is the second time in less than a year that Ken has gotten a visit from the FBI. And this is the article that Ken pointed this out. I'm fascinated by this because there's supposed to be a First Amendment in this country. And the idea that these guys are coming there seemingly trying to get him to incriminate himself in a crime, no less, is pretty astonishing. And he says, FBI visits me over manifesto. Here's the 11 questions they asked. Now, Ken is publishing the 11 questions, even though the FBI told him not to talk about this to anybody. So it's like they're like, don't tell anybody this. And he immediately publishes the questions. But he points out that he put out the manifesto of the killer, Rodriguez. He gets a visit from the FBI out of the blue. And they are asking him incriminating questions like, hey, when did you know about this? Did you have anything to do with the killer? Oh, that's an interesting one, right? Did you have anything to do with the killer? Did you know that he was going to do this before he did this attack? Meaning these questions seemingly are trying to incriminate him in a crime that he had nothing to do with. He's just a journalist publishing the article. Give me your take on this. I mean, is this normal for the FBI to do to journalists?
You know, I will say one part of it is normal, that and you saw this after 9/11. After 9/11, and I was even on an interview, one of our local public television shows with our U.S. attorney. I was still the legal counsel in Minneapolis, and we got a lot of criticism because the FBI started knocking on doors. So they called this, there was a term for it, but it means knocking on doors. So normally, you know what, the FBI agents are paid a lot of money. You know, they don't need to spend their time going out and knocking on people's doors saying, hey, what do you know? What do you know about terrorism in a general blanket way? I mean, this would be ridiculously ineffective. Right. But after 9/11, there were groups of agents that were sent out. Of course, it was somewhat targeted to people that they thought, you know, Muslims, imams, whatever. And it has a dual purpose. It was not only to say, oh, what do you know about Al-Qaeda and terrorism? Do you know anyone in Afghanistan or in Iraq? So those types of questions. But also they were those door knocks were trying to develop informants. And so by pretending, I shouldn't say pretending, you know, by and large, the FBI agents I worked with were nice. We were nice. And so they tried to be nice. And that way they hope that maybe through bribing somebody with money or whatever, that they will then become an informant. So there was a dual purpose for these door knocks. Now, the FBI overall got criticized, even by the mainstream media. What are you doing? You're harassing people. And I and the U.S. attorney went on our public television show here was my point. And I said, it's legal, because a lot of the press was saying this is illegal to go up to the doors and knock without any reasonable suspicion or without probable cause. You can't go up to someone's door and say, hey, I want to talk to you. And I was the legal counsel. I said, no, that's as long as you stay, you don't, sneak over and peek through a window, but as long as you stay on the doorstep and you knock, ring the doorbell, perfectly legal. And then the people have a choice. They don't have to talk with you. If they want to shut the door, they can. and whatever. So that was my point. And I don't remember what the U.S. attorney, but we were trying to defend this practice that we started after 9/11. Now, in history, I will say one more thing. I should have probably mentioned that this type of overall overreaching, again, door knock. This goes back to Vietnam, where it's not a good idea to do this. So even if it's legal to go knocking on doors and kind of harassing people is not especially good idea for law enforcement. During Vietnam, and I joined really close, a few years after Vietnam War ended. And when we went through Quantico, we were told that a lot of people would not open their doors. And so, for instance, we had to do background investigations, just perfectly banal, like your neighbor is being appointed a judge. And so now the FBI has to talk to all the neighbors. That's a good example. But anytime you're up for a federal appointment, you have to go knock on the doors and ask the neighbors, does he drink? Does he have whole parties? That type of thing. And you know what? In 1981, when I was doing this, a lot of people would not open their doors. So you would knock and say, FBI, just want to ask a few questions or whatever, and people would not open the doors. And this is a throwback to what happened during Vietnam when the FBI was all up, mostly looking for draft dodgers. So they were going up in this blanket way, trying to find people who had skipped out on the military or whatever, AWOL and draft dodgers, etc. So, there was a backlash. What I'm saying is there was a backlash from Vietnam that even when I joined the FBI, it showed you that, this kind of harassing thing and going out and knocking on doors is not a good idea. Okay, so that has happened in the past. Somewhat normal if you go by what happened after 9/11. It was normalized again, I should say. Okay, now what's different about what's going on now? And you alluded to it in your question, is now doing this with journalists. That's the new wrinkle on it. If we had done this with journalists, even right after 9/11, again, we got into trouble. The FBI, the FBI at the time. By the way, I've been retired since 2004, and so sometimes I automatically say we, but obviously I'm retired for 20 years now. And so I shouldn't be saying we anymore. But the FBI got into trouble even when they weren't targeting journalists after 9/11. And now all of this has been so normalized that Ken Klippenstein, and others, he's not the only one, Max Blumenthal, there have been a lot of journalists, and that they claim that journalists who do not agree with U.S. perpetual war policy and now the Israeli genocide. If you are against Israeli genocide, they're trying to make you into a complicit with terrorism or even a terrorist. They've even called people, there's a law. They're trying to pass a law in Congress that they would go after nonprofits if they protest against Israeli genocide and say that, oh, well, you're part of the terrorism. I mean, this is so ludicrous. And yet, with how they manipulate people, based on American pride. And of course, here we are, Memorial Day, and, military pride and all this. It works to a great extent on a lot of people. And there are a lot of Americans who now think that if you are against killing of babies, I mean, that picture of the little 3-year-old, I'm sure she's trying to find her way out of the flames and probably died. I mean, I can't, I have 5 grandchildren. I had my granddaughter here yesterday, 2 years old. I cannot even begin to imagine how bad this is and how horrible. And yet, for me saying that it's horrible for Israelis to be murdering children like this, they are going to say that you are complicit with terrorism. Because the Israelis and AIPAC and all of the lobby so controls our Congress. By the way, that's why we're suing. We have a class action against our congresspersons because 7 out of 8 of them all voted to give more bombs and arms to Israel when they're killing children like this. And yeah, the propaganda, okay, there's maybe one good side to this, and then I'll shut up. The one good side is this is so ludicrous and so bad that I just can't imagine that more Americans are not seeing how bad this is. And good for Ken Klippenstein trying to expose that, you know what, we have a First Amendment, freedom of press, and, you know, it is legal to knock on the door, absolutely legal. You can ask you can even ask a journalist. Now, we're supposed to be careful, but by the way, with the freedom of press, there were always regulations, not actual statutes, but there were policy and regulations that were supposed to limit the kind of harassment that the FBI could do on journalists. And that was, and even it went as far as saying you were not supposed to serve a subpoena on a journalist. There was it was in the Code of Federal Regulations. You were supposed to first voluntarily ask, and then I think you needed a court order or something. I mean, it was basically limiting what you could ask of a journalist, and that was by policy and regulations. And I'm sorry to say, I think in the 20 years that I've been retired, I think a lot of this has been ignored or, kind of, evaporated, which is very obvious now with what they did to Ken Klippenstein. I mean, if you can knock on a door and say, you didn't have any prior knowledge of this or something, fine. And if he wants to answer or not, it is legal. But it is not a good practice for the FBI to do this in a widespread way because it's going to backfire on the cooperation that the public would normally want to give to police efforts. If their neighbor is a drug dealer, if their neighbor is a serial killer, you want to have the public help you, or a kidnapper. Guess what? That's why I joined the FBI. I joined the FBI because I didn't want to see children being kidnapped and murdered. I didn't want to see serial killers. I didn't want to see drugs being sold to kids or whatever. That's why I joined. And you know what? It kind of makes you mad then when the neighbor says, I don't like that guy, but I'm not going to cooperate with the FBI. You're the bad FBI. And I think this is what the FBI should worry about. They should worry about the backlash.
I think the issue is this is intimidation. I mean, it's if you are going to a random neighbor because you have, let's say, a drug issue in your community, and you are talking, like, for example, there used to be a house maybe a block or so away from where my grandmother used to live. And everybody understood there's squatters in that house that are selling drugs. Everybody knew there was something dodgy about that house. Okay, so it's one thing if you go to a neighbor and say, hey, what's going on with this house? And they said, look, man, they're doing deals out here at 2 a.m, et cetera. I get that, right? That makes sense. Or somebody calls the FBI and say, hey, I think a kid is being kept against their will at this other place. Again, I get that. Wellness checks. I get wellness checks, right? I haven't heard from this person in 3 days. I'm knocking on the door to make sure the person is okay.
Exactly.
Ken Klippenstein writes an article and you knock on his door, again, for the second time in less than a year. You know he's a journalist. You know what he does. And your questions seemingly are there to get him to implicate himself in a crime. Like I used to binge watch police interrogations. Oh, I love them. They're the most fascinating things in the world to me. It makes you realize, don't talk to the cops. If you've done anything, I don't care what it is, don't talk to the cops. Those things are scripted and organized in a way to get you to confess. everything that's happening there is almost theatrical in the way that it's set up in order to get you to confess to something. And oftentimes, an American citizen not knowing their rights and maybe not even knowing what is a crime may volunteer information or wrap themselves into a logic trap where they have to confess to something. There's no way out of that box. The best thing you can do in that box is draw. You can't win. Even if the cop thinks you're innocent, the cop can't go to the court and say, well, I think the guy's innocent, because that's not really, he tells you everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. It doesn't say anything can help you. Everything can be used against you. When you're talking to Ken and you're asking him these questions, for example, like they were asking him stuff like, where had I gotten the manifesto? Had I had pre-knowledge of the attack? Did I receive instructions about how to release the statement? Okay, let's say he said yes to the last one. Could he be implicated in a crime? Like, that's what I mean. Like, these questions are set up and they keep telling him, you're not in trouble. You're not in trouble. Okay, well, cops can lie to people. And so the very fact that saying you're not in trouble, but asking him something that can directly incriminate him in a crime is pretty outrageous. I just find this to be intimidation. And finally, he produces the questions. There were 11 questions. When did he encounter the manifesto? How did he first encounter the manifesto? Did he receive instructions from the source of the manifesto on how to disseminate it? Okay, so all three of those questions get implicated in a crime. Does the system or platform for which he received the manifesto, is it capable of metadocs concerning the transfer of the manifesto? Okay, that one is getting directly to sources, which is, again, supposed to be protected. So they want him to, on some level, if he says yes, to then divulge the source of where he got the information from. Did he make any edits to the manifesto? Okay, that's fair enough. Was this the first and only interaction with who submitted the manifesto? Okay. So did you have any relationship to the person who ostensibly wrote the manifesto, ideally the killer? Did the receipt of the manifesto predate the attack? Did you get this before he killed these people? Where else, if any, did he disseminate the manifesto? Does he have any knowledge of where the manifesto was published or shared? And why does he think he was the one who received the manifesto? Why do you think he gave it to you, buddy? Now, I don't know if Kit answered these questions. He told him to go talk to his lawyer. He just said, talk to my lawyer. I don't want anything to do with this, talk to my lawyer. It is his job as a journalist to do this, from my point of view. And by the way, the cops released manifestos too. If you remember, the trans person who went in and killed all of those people, the cops were supposed to release the manifesto of that person. Personally, I think the Bin Laden manifesto should have been released. You should know why somebody did something. Maybe they have a point, even if what they did was atrocious. And in this case, Ken does his job as a journalist, lets it go, and he gets a visit from the cops. You tell me, are these questions trying to implicate him in a crime? That's the way I took it. I didn't take it anywhere else. Either we want your sources, or were you somehow responsible, like associated with the person as they did this?
Yes, I totally agree. Many, if not most of those questions could, if he had answered them, could have implicated him. And I will just mention one more little legal tidbit. They do, police or FBI do not have to give Miranda rights unless you're in custody. So if they question you when you are in custody, now when they do a door knock, you're in your own house. And so, they will never give Miranda rights to somebody
without ever getting Miranda. That's your point.
Yeah. Yep. No, when they do a door knock, they will never give Miranda rights. And so many groups now, again, this is part of the backlash, are saying either don't open the door. Now, problem is if they do have a search warrant or something, they can bust your door down. It can be dangerous. They can even do flashbang. So it's very difficult to know what to advise people. If they say FBI, we have a search warrant or we have an arrest warrant, and they're supposed to knock, they are supposed to knock and wait. They're not supposed to rush in, because those types of situations are dangerous. If people they don't know who's breaking into their house. And there's been all kinds. The reason they created a law, this is a statute, knock and announce is a legal requirement. And so they're supposed to knock, they're supposed to announce their identity and their authority and their purpose. And yeah, and if they just knock and say, FBI, we have some questions for you. No, you would be free at that point not to even answer the door. Yeah. And again, I'm going back to the backlash because as you mentioned, there's a lot of legitimate reasons for the FBI to knock on your door, or any law enforcement, police or any law enforcement to knock on a door. This is not good for law enforcement. It's a dumb thing for them to be doing this in a general overreaching way because it's going to hurt their own efforts, their own investigative and public safety efforts. It's a bad thing. And in this case, why did the FBI say don't publish the questions that we're asking you? Okay, right. I can guess they don't want people to be forewarned. There are thank goodness, there are some other journalists who are, I would say, like Klippenstein, but they were like Julian Assange, the Gray Zone, Mate. There are some other good journalists who have the bravery. Chris Hedges, I just watched this long discussion. He gave a public talk. Chris Hedges, he's been through it. He's been around the block on all of this intimidation. And, he got fired from the New York Times for being against the Iraq War. He was not allowed to say the Iraq War was a lie. I mean, incredible. So that type of effort now to go against journalists, that the FBI does not want any other journalists that are in their crosshairs, like Chris Hedges even. They don't want them to know ahead of time that you're right. Many of these questions are designed to implicate them so that they could be charged. For instance, one good example is the espionage, the old 1917 Espionage Act. Because that law, you can use that for whistleblowers. They tried, James Risen at the time was a Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times journalist. He published the fact that the United States was illegally mass surveilling American citizens, and they were intent on finding out who his source was. He had more than one source anyway. But he wrote a book and it was on mass surveillance. And also it was something about, I think, Iran, where they tried to do this kind of a false flag thing on Iran, where they leaked them false nuclear plans. There was something like that as well. Well, of course, he had sources. Risen just didn't guess these things. He had some whistleblower sources, and they went after Risen. So Klippenstein, he's in good company in some ways, because there have been journalists. Again, if you try to be I.F. Stone, if you try to be I.F. Stone these days, they're going to put you in their list. They have a list of journalists they want to try to target. And going back to, I wanted to say one thing about Manifesto. Here's the kicker, the irony was the only way that the FBI was finally able to catch the Unabomber. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, was sending mail bombs for 18 years. And really? The FBI, 18 years. And he killed, I think, 6 or 7 people. Some of them were just secretaries, and they opened up the mail bomb. He was against technology, and his method, okay, fine to be against technology, but his method of going after technology was to send mail bombs to the heads of tech companies, whatever. He did this for 18 years. He lived in a little cabin in Montana. No one knew him. He was a little bit extremist. I mean, he was a lot extremist in that one area of sending mail bombs, but he didn't even really have, his family barely was in touch with him. The bottom line is they never would have caught him. The FBI never would have caught they were offering $1 million reward, and they had a couple of sketches, and that was it. They never would have caught the Unabomber terrorists had they were asked to publish the manifesto, at least for a couple of years. The FBI, we don't want to publish a terrorist manifesto. Finally, some person who knows psychology in the we had psychologists in the FBI. So someone said, publish it. And the first time that was published, his brother, the only person in the United States who could have realized that his own brother was sending the mail bombs through the thing. And he called the FBI. And so that's a dramatic illustration of why journalism and getting the truth out is important. It's a dramatic, and again, people get locked into these stupid groupie think. I call it groupie think, but it's basically manipulation. The FBI gets these agents who go out, they think it's a good idea to ask those questions, whatever. No, it's got a lot of problems. And I just hope there's more Coleen Rowleys that have brains and that think about this, when they're asked to do something that's like more whistleblowers, essentially. Because when you're asked to do something that's wrong or illegal, that you really have to say no.
Coleen, you are fantastic. And I hope that there are more Coleens still in the FBI also. They need them. They need them. Lord knows they do. Coleen Rowley, she is a lawyer, retired FBI agent, former MPLS legal counsel who wrote a memo for the FBI's pre-9/11 failures and testified at the Senate Judiciary Committee. She is also a Democratic former Labor Party candidate for Congress in Minnesota. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. I know it's early. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You have a good one. Be safe. All
Happy
right.
day.
Oh, yes. Happy Memorial Day. Back at you also. And by the way, good job. You have much respect for me on what you were doing, and she has left. Fair enough. We've come to the end. We have come to the end. Coleen, she is fantastic. She has been with us for a while. So she has my appreciation for coming on. Matthew, will NATO blockade Russian ships unless those NATO ships want to die? Keep in mind, Russia at this point has started to escort their ships. If you saw the thing with Estonia, they've started to send out their military personnel to escort their ships to prevent any notion of a blockade. If they want to start a war, go after one of their ships. Goes down to that. Sparky, Christy Nome is deeply psychologically disturbed. Well, yeah. She recalls killing her dog and goat with gleeful nostalgia, an obvious red flag. Yes. So she was the one who got in trouble for talking about killing her dog. What is it? Well, Republicans and these dogs. I mean, Mitt Romney had his dog sitting on the roof of the car for a trip. It was like, what's wrong with you? Somebody else finally talked about shooting their dog. These people are lunatics. Landrew, thank you. Just from my heart to yours, thank you. China, Russia could shame the world cargo ships to Palestine of food. I'm sorry. China and Russia could shame the world, I think it's supposed to be with cargo ships to Palestine of food, fuel, and healthcare. Yeah, and effectively dare anybody to stop them. Dare anybody to stop them. It will take some ballsy Israeli out there who would do that. I mean, but again, they're burning kids alive, so put it in context. Sparky, after the Berlin Wall came down, I remember thinking that Marshall Plan was obvious thing to do. A missed opportunity for extended peace. I was shocked it wasn't done. Sparky, if you were shocked, you weren't paying attention. As I told what's his name, peace wasn't the point. In fact, if you go and listen to Jeffrey Sachs said the exact same thing. Because Jeffrey Sachs, he was like, I believed all of the stuff that America was saying about freedom and justice and peaceful world and all this other stuff. And he said they bluntly told him, dude, we're not doing that. It's like, we're not helping those Ruskies out. The entire point is to isolate Russia in the situation. The entire point is to destroy that society. We're not doing a Marshall Plan to help them out. And listen to Jeffrey Sachs. He talks about this, where he himself was shocked that the U.S. wasn't willing to have the Marshall Plan. We were looking for ways to destroy the remnants of the Soviet Union to ensure that it can never challenge us again. That main remnant beating heart was Russia. So the attack was against Russia. Matthew, will NATO go into Ukraine? The better question is, does NATO want to die? That's a better question, Matthew. Do they want to die? That's a better question. Janice Anderson, the oath military take to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. The greatest threats to the Constitution are Congress, Senate, and administration. God bless you. You're 1,000% correct. You're 1,000% correct. Look at this bill, the big, beautiful bill that's being passed. Let's just take that by itself. A government by the people and for the people. Okay. And yet, they're passing a bill that's going to put $20 trillion on the debt, that's going to gut social services more than it's ever been gutted. And you have the administration and its cronies lying about the fact that it's putting $20 trillion on the debt. Is that in the best interest of the American public? Yeah or nay? That's just one context. I mean, we can hit many of those, but that's just one. Andrew G. Knock, Jamal Thomas, buddy, native white Norwegians and probably other white Europeans too just want peace. We want to be independent. We want every nation to be independent. So I've been to Norway. I went to Oslo in the wintertime. I went in the winter because the cheapest tickets were dirt cheap, because apparently it's fucking freezing in Norway during the winter. I took my wife on vacation with me. That was me, either Valentine or something. It was a trip. It couldn't have been Valentine's because it was during the winter, but it was some special occasion for. I loved Norway, loved it. But when it gets to issues of foreign policy, it just seems like these European countries are nuts. It just seems like they're nuts. Present company excluded, obviously. I'm just saying, from a foreign policy sense. I would say the same thing about my government. My government is nuts, right? Oliver Hardaway became a member. Well, welcome to the family, Oliver. Thank you for joining. Lab 66, China and Russia are admired for their degree, of morality. These two countries do not need to maintain any ties with fascist entity and undermine goodwill towards them around the world as a result. Fair enough. Norwegian brother Alexander challenged me. You accepted the challenge. Alexander G, thanks for doing this live stream, Jamal. Well, thank you for joining, man. Best wishes to from your white Norwegian native subscriber. Well, I don't care if you're white, you're a subscriber. That's all that matters. And thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. Jabari, BLC Media, what a treat. We have Jamal on Memorial Day. What a treat indeed. All right, guys, we have come to the end. Oh, we have one more. Kimchi, primarily cabbage, is a good choice for low-calorie and low-carb applications. Sparky, and that is referring to Coleen, who is on the solidarity diet. I can't even call it a diet, it's fast. I mean, 250 calories is nothing. It's like one French fry, half a soda. Like, to put it in context on how little it is. She said she was doing cabbage. I'm sorry, she was doing lettuce, but as you point out, the cabbage diet may also help. It's something, right? I mean, those kids weren't even getting 250 calories. They were just being starved to death. And it is difficult to even do that. So, all right, guys, I'm going to close this. Thank you for joining me. This is a special occasion. I'm at my new crib. I will be here for 2 to 3 months, most ideally 3 if things go well. You all have a fantastic evening, and thank all of you. You support the show. You make the show what it is in real terms. So you all have a good, decent day, and I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Same time, same place. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 161. Signing off. Be safe, everyone.